I have reborn a billion times. Surui has been reborn billions of times, and his life has been reincarnated. He used to indulge himself and live a life of luxury and debauchery. He also used to run wild and gallop on the battlefield. In billions of reincarnations, his skills have reached the peak. He is a soldier king, a politician, a star, a car god, an omniscient, and an almighty. When the sun rises again, the reincarnation ends. Chapter 1, I have reborn a billion times. Tongju City, Phoebe Bar. In a dimly lit corner of the bar, a man and a woman sat laughing and chatting in a booth. Surui held a glass of wine, his eyes smiling. I'll tell you a secret, actually. I have been reborn countless times. Reborn. The woman was stunningly beautiful. In the flashing lights, her clear, sharp black and white eyes held a cold, distant gleam. Her features were sculpted to perfection, her skin fair and delicate, as if it could break with a touch. Between her brows, there was an air of pride, like a rose blooming on an iceberg. Her lips were red and full, seductive. Most men, after just one glance, would feel ashamed of themselves. She took a sip of her wine, shook her head, and smiled lightly. Over the years, countless people had tried various odd methods to get close to her. All of them ended badly. Every time I turn 25, I am reborn back to the age of 18. Even death can't break this cycle, it always resets on that day. In these countless rebirths, I have changed identities, learned all the secrets, held every profession, mastered various skills, and reached the pinnacle with each cycle. I am omniscient. If I choose, I can also become omnipotent. Silence. A deep silence. Apart from the music still raging in the dance floor, the woman sitting across from Surui had a strange expression on her face. Heh! Finally, the woman laughed, her eyes filled with charm and a hint of scrutiny. Little brother, using strange stories to grab attention and make girls interested doesn't work on me. The CEO of Mingzhu Corporation, you sure aren't easy to deceive, Surui smiled. But everything I said is true. Li Ruobing, born in Tongju City on February 18, 1987, height 172 centimeters, weight 52 kilograms, blood type O, loves rap music and fitness. She studied at the University of Pennsylvania, majoring in marketing, and after returning to China, she founded her luxury brand. Currently, she is worth over $1 billion and is hailed as the youngest business genius and a beautiful CEO. Your father, Li Guodong, is the chairman of Wanton Group. Your family background is complicated blended family, a half-brother, but you've always had a poor relationship with your stepmother. Of course, this isn't really a secret. Anyone who pays attention can find this information. But what I'm about to say may involve your privacy. Surui narrowed his eyes and said seriously, are you sure you want to continue? Li Ruobing swirled her glass, her eyes a bit tipsy, yet still exuding an imposing aura. I'd like to hear what you know. I also know that tonight, you will voluntarily leave with me and go home. Leave with you? You mean we'll become a couple tonight? No, just a purely physical relationship. I've taken quite a liking to your style, the Ice Queen, so conquerable. And dating is too troublesome, isn't it? Li Ruobing's gaze turned icy. Yes, dating was indeed too troublesome. As a self-made female CEO of a billion-dollar company, she naturally had a tough attitude. If Surui was just trying to flirt with her, she wouldn't hesitate to use her methods to throw him into a gutter. Tonight, she had planned to have a quiet drink by herself, not wanting to attract attention. But Surui had approached her, and in such situations in bars, she had indulged in conversation with him since he wasn't bad looking. What she hadn't expected was that Surui was a little crazy, drinking a few glasses of wine and spouting nonsense about being reborn 1 billion times. And more importantly, he seemed to know her personal details quite well. Heh, a man with ulterior motives. If it wasn't for your decent looks, you'd already be lying on the floor after saying that. Li Ruobing's tone was cold, her beautiful eyes flashing with dangerous light. Even though her cheeks were flushed from a bit of drunkenness, her presence was still imposing. Continue. Your favorite color is black because it represents your character, cold, proud. Your favorite weight event is shooting targets, and the gun you're most skilled with is the American Glock. Your measurements are 93-64-92. The lingerie you're wearing today is from Golden Queen, the lace model. Though, this size doesn't really fit you. You should feel a bit tight right now. After finishing, Surui smiled knowingly, seemingly waiting for Lee Ruobing's reaction. Lee Ruobing, unfazed, fastened a button on her shirt and fixed her cold gaze on Surui. Her voice was frosty, like ice. "You've been spying on me? Want to die? Don't be so violent. I told you, I've been reborn 1,000,000,000 times." Surui chuckled softly in her ear. "In my 23,821st life, I decided to fully investigate your preferences, learn all your hobbies and views on life, and became your most intimate boyfriend. These secrets are all things you told me yourself." Lee Ruobing stared into Surui's eyes, trying to find a crack or hesitation in his expression. Under her gaze, very few people could remain calm. But today, she was mistaken. Surui still had that lazy smile, taking a sip of red wine, his lips curled. "Is that so? Then let us go somewhere else and talk about our love story." Lee Ruobing didn't believe Surui's words, her tone icy as she spoke. "Don't rush." Surui pressed his arms on the table, picked up a glass of wine, and smiled. "Tonight, we still have many things to do. Tomorrow will be my 25th birthday, and everything will reset. So let us indulge tonight and create an unforgettable memory." Surui licked his lips, staring at Lee Ruobing's face. "Tell me, what suppressed wishes have you had in your heart, things that seem almost impossible? Tonight, I'll make them all come true." "You really know how to make up stories," a voice sneered from the nearby booth. "Come on, beautiful, come over here and I'll tell you my story." A few tall, burly young men gathered around a young man in a grey jacket. The young man looked sullen, his face pale and sickly. "That's Lin Qianyu, the second son of the Lin family." Lee Ruobing recognized the young man and said, "I've heard he's a reckless guy, a little blind to his limits." "It doesn't matter, I'll gouge his eyes out and apologize to you," Surui laughed lightly. In countless rebirths, he had spent his last night in this bar many times, and every time, the same events would unfold. Lin Qianyu would always appear and target Lee Ruobing. He had watched coldly, even used various brutal or cunning means to interfere. But once tomorrow arrived, everything would reset. The same things would happen again in the next cycle. It was meaningless. So, Surui did everything based on his own preferences. Sleep with beautiful women, drive luxury cars, and beat up the rich. He only cared about pleasing himself. Other people's status didn't matter, everyone was the same to him, like ants. Footsteps approached. One of the burly youths from Lin Qianyu's group slapped Lee Ruobing on the shoulder. "Beautiful, my boss Lin would like to invite you. Please come over for a drink." The burly youth smiled coldly, completely ignoring Surui beside Lee Ruobing. In Tongju City, no one dared to compete with Lin Qianyu for a woman he set his sights on. Lin Qianyu's reputation was extremely poor. The spoiled second-generation rich heir, as labeled by the people of Tongju City, was a man without morals. Involved in crime, drugs, and violent extortion, he was a perfect example of a scumbag. Lee Ruobing glanced at him indifferently, then smiled, leaning on Surui's shoulder. "But what if my boyfriend disagrees? This woman was always so cunning. At times, she was like an ice queen, and other times, like a capricious fox demon. With just one movement, she shifted the firepower to Surui." Surui smiled helplessly. But it was precisely because of this that he liked Lee Ruobing more. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had more than 100 interactions beyond just friendship with her in countless rebirths. "We've heard what Lin said," the burly youth said, blocking the passage to the booth, grabbing Surui by the collar and raising an eyebrow. "Are you going to refuse this face?" Before he could finish speaking, a sharp wind whooshed through. Bang! A loud crash silenced the music in the dance floor, and everyone jumped in surprise. The burly youth was already on the floor, clutching his head as blood oozed from his skull. Surui stood up, holding a broken wine bottle in his hand, expressionless, licking his lips. He had acted too fast, and the other man didn't even have time to react. "What right does a second-generation rich kid have to demand respect from me?" Surui made his move instantly, a lethal strike to the head. Smashing a wine bottle over someone's head was much more dangerous than in movies. The bottle's hardness was much greater than imagined, and the force needed to break it over someone's head was enough to be fatal. The cinematic scenes where someone smashed over the head with a bottle and got up to fight again were unrealistic. Moreover, wine bottles were tougher than beer bottles. Surui's strike was aimed to kill. His expression remained unchanged, as though such matters didn't concern him. He didn't care about killing people. After countless rebirths, he couldn't remember how much blood he had spilled. He had orchestrated terror attacks, been a ruthless butcher, and served in special forces, wreaking havoc on brutal battlefields abroad. When everything could reset, life held no value for Surui. Not his own, nor anyone else's. Boyi fell. Help! Lin Chenyu, who had been reclining on the couch, frowned as the surrounding thugs froze. How dare you attack someone from the Lin family? The thugs shoved their way through the crowd, rushing towards Surui. Your words just proved my omniscience, Surui said with a smile, tossing aside the broken bottle. I forgot to mention, in one of my past lives, I was also a soldier king. In the cycle of rebirth, memories didn't fade, and physical injuries were repaired. Combat skills and physical strength accumulated. Time had turned Surui into a terrifying monster. Get him? Several more birdie youths charged forward, eager to gang up on him. Surui laughed coldly and kicked one. Poof! A youth was sent flying faster than before, his chest caving invisibly. It was clear that several ribs had broken. The thugs around Lin Chenyu were clearly well trained, likely from a professional security company, top-tier bodyguards. But unfortunately for them, they were facing a human monster. 3 seconds. Surui only needed 3 seconds. 6 well-built men were lying on the floor, their limbs twisted in impossible angles, none of them able to rise. Chapter 2, The Ruthless Character, Surui, Who Knows All the Secrets. Silence. After a moment of deathly quiet. Damn it! Someone has been killed. Chaos erupted in the bar, as customers screamed in fear, frightened by the sight of Boyi lying in a pool of blood, and rushed to escape in a panic. Lin Chenyu was in shock. In the blink of an eye, all his underlings had been taken down, and the attack was brutally decisive, completely disregarding the consequences. This person was either a roaming bandit or a direct descendant of a top-tier family, with deep connections and no inhibitions. The bar instantly became empty. Surui cracked his neck and motioned for Lin Chenyu to come closer with a finger. Hey, which family are you from? Lin Chenyu's face twisted with malice, but his tone remained arrogant. Have you considered the consequences of targeting the Lin family? Don't try to test me. My background might be average, but taking you down is no problem at all. Surui smiled brightly. In this life, he hadn't really changed the course of the world much aside from making some money to improve his quality of life, he hadn't risen in social rank. Hey, Lin Chenyu sneered nervously. Though his heart was starting to panic, he kept his composure on the outside. Do you believe that within 3 days, I'll have you kneel and send this woman to my bed? He was confident after all, the Lin family had been operating in Tongju for many years, and no one dared to oppose him. What he wanted to do, he could do. No woman could escape if he wanted her. A smooth-sailing life had forged his reckless personality, which had become twisted and perverse. Surui walked steadily, his body towering like a mountain. He took a step and crossed over the couch, grabbing Lin Chenyu by the collar, without hesitation, smashing a wine bottle over his head. Clean and decisive. Glass shattered, and wine mixed with blood flowed down Lin Chenyu's scalp. Damn! Lin Chenyu's head rang, blanking out for several seconds. After the intense pain spread throughout his body, the remaining drunkenness was instantly wiped away, his eyes blazing with fury and disbelief. Do you know who I am? I'll kill your whole family. Bang! The wine bottle shattered over Lin Chenyu's head again. The security guards present stood stunned. It was incredibly brutal. Lin Chenyu, who had been ruling Tongju for so many years, had never been treated so terribly. I've killed more people than you've seen. Surui's heart was as solid as a rock. He wasn't lying. In a previous life, he had orchestrated a terrorist attack, causing chaos in a foreign country. Unrestrained, defiant, with no bottom line or scruples. Surui remained expressionless, pulling out his phone and dialing a number, turning on the speakerphone. The call was answered quickly. Hello? The voice on the other end sounded wary and fatigued. It was his personal phone, known only to the family's direct descendants and core members. Just one word, and Lin Chenyu immediately recognized the voice of his father, Lin Jiaotao, the head of the Lin family. Mr. Lin, your kid sure knows how to stir up trouble. Have you forgotten what was said at the last Far East Chamber of Commerce meeting? At a time like this, if you can't keep your people in check and cause trouble for the chamber, you can just withdraw. Su Rui spoke coldly, sneering. In Tongju, we helped build up the Lin family, but we won't hesitate to bring it down. Lin Jiaotao was stunned. Had Qianyu caused trouble again? Was this person from another leading family in the chamber? Though the Lin family was considered prestigious in Tongju, it couldn't compare to the Far East Chamber of Commerce, which spanned several provinces and involved countless industries. The Lin family would be nothing without the chamber's support. The president of the chamber had even attended last month's meeting, giving orders for all families and groups to manage their subordinates, to avoid attracting trouble during this sensitive period. This was an internal meeting, and no one dared leak any details. The fact that this person knew his private number and this matter. Lin Jiaotao's tone shifted to one of respect, and he cautiously asked, "Who is this? Who do you think provided you with that 1.5 billion? Su Rui asked. Su. Director Su. Lin Jiaotao's scalp tingled. When the Lin family was in financial crisis, nearly bankrupt, it was a director from the chamber who had lent them 1.5 billion to save them. I understand. This young man was a direct descendant of the Su family. If this happens again, I'll bring your Lin family down the same way I built it up. Do you understand? Su Rui deliberately crouched in front of Lin Qianyu so that he could hear the conversation with Lin Jiaotao. Understood. Understood. Lin Jiaotao paused for a moment, his voice filled with pleading. I was wrong. I'll personally go to the chamber and explain it to Director Su. Qianyu is my only son, I'm 52 years old. Please show mercy. Silence. Lin Qianyu gritted his teeth. He had never experienced such a scene, unable to rely even on his father. Dear, do you want me to gouge his eyes out? Su Rui raised an eyebrow, looking at Li Ruobing, to apologize. Disgusting. Li Ruobing immediately responded with 2 words. Qianyu. Apologize. Lin Jiaotao shouted on the phone. He was genuinely worried that if Director Su got angry, his son might be severely injured. After all, the Su family wasn't even on the same level as the Lin family. The Su family dominated the entire southern region, while the Lin family was just a small fish in a tiny pond in Tongju. Lin Qianyu's breath quickened, his eyes bloodshot. Didn't you hear? Lin Jiaotao's furious voice came through again. Sorry. I'm a bastard. I was wrong. Lin Qianyu clenched his teeth, his eyes red, his body bent at a 90-degree angle as he bowed to Su Rui and Li Ruobing. Big brother, big sister. Please forgive my rashness. Li Ruobing remained indifferent, swirling her wine glass. However, her mind was racing. If earlier, Su Rui's actions had shown his skill and bravery by taking down Lin Qianyu and his crew, now, the fact that even Lin Jiaotao was so fearful and ordered Lin Qianyu to apologize to Su Rui was beyond imagination. Who exactly was Su Rui? Forget it, I have other things to do. Su Rui tilted his head. By the way, have the damages in the bar repaired. Got it. Lin Qianyu remained silent, gritting his teeth and nodding. Su Rui stepped forward, pulled Li Ruobing's slender waist close, lightly nipped her lips, and winked at her. Let us go, dear wife. If there is an opportunity to take advantage, why not? Who asked you to just call me your boyfriend? The issue had been settled. Although it didn't go as Su Rui initially planned by directly taking out Lin Qianyu, it was enough. On the last night of this life, with a beautiful woman by his side, Su Rui didn't want to soil his hands with blood and ruin the mood. The two walked out of the bar. Li Ruobing allowed Su Rui to hold her without resistance, her gaze sharp, staring at him. You're not in cahoots with Lin Qianyu, setting me up, are you? Overthinking, Su Rui chuckled lightly. Li Ruobing didn't think it was likely either. Though the Li family was at the top in Tongju, the Lin family wasn't far behind. It wouldn't make sense for the Lin family to throw away their face and join forces with Su Rui to stage a play just to win her over. A Pagani Huayra sports car flashed its lights, roaring with engine noise. Su Rui, is that really your name? Li Ruobing's hair was disheveled by the wind. Under the influence of alcohol, her eyes were seductive, and she whispered, rebirth stories sound like a bunch of lies. Whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter anymore, Su Rui smiled lightly. You'll forget about me tomorrow and start a new life. The supercar slowly drove into a high-end residential area, where the wealthy gathered. I told you, tonight you'd come with me. Surui pulled Li Ruobing's waist and pinched her soft, smooth chin with a wicked grin. If you want to run now, it's a bit late. Li Ruobing's eyes didn't flinch. She suddenly wrapped her arms around Surui's neck and kissed him. After sitting in the CEO seat of Mingzhu Group for so long, she felt suffocated. But tonight, she felt an unprecedented release and novelty from Surui. This was a carnival after releasing her true nature. With this man, she could experience joy without any rules to constrain her. Feeling the tremble of his warm body, Surui's lips curled into a slight arc as he passionately responded. Two patrolling security guards passed by and, recognizing the situation, switched off their flashlights. Living in the wealthy district, one had to have a good sense of what was happening. Though inwardly, they cursed, damn, rich people sure know how to play. Let us go upstairs. Surui, though he had been reborn countless times, still adhered to some basic principles. I don't have a hobby of showing people around for free. Surui pulled a bag from the car. What is that? Li Ruobing squinted in the weak light of the street lamp and saw a bow tie. Some accessories to stimulate male hormones. Surui chuckled strangely and whispered into Li Ruobing's ear. Maid outfits, office outfits, bunny girl costumes, you can pick one, or want to try them all. Li Ruobing snorted coldly, her brows furrowed in disapproval. Don't like them? No. After a long pause, she said, I want to be on top. Chapter 3, A New Life. Who slept with who? The soft morning sun rose, streaming through the window into the room. Surui woke up, his gaze somewhat lazy. Time had reset once again. It was another cycle, another repetition of a familiar life. It was dull and disorienting. What identity would he live out this time? Happy birthday to you. The melodious birthday song played on time, and Surui reached out to grab his phone and turned it off. Woke up. A pleasant voice came from the side, tinged with a hint of deliberate mockery. Didn't you say everything would reset today? Surui's body stiffened. He threw the blanket off himself and slowly turned his neck towards the source of the voice. Li Ruobing was sitting there, looking completely different from last night. She was tall and slender, with long, straight black hair, a cool and glamorous makeup look, and a powerful presence. Just sitting there, her imposing aura and pressure were palpable. This powerful aura, combined with her beauty, made it even harder for people to resist the urge to conquer her. But at this moment, Surui wasn't interested in admiring the beauty beside him. There was a birthday cake on the table, with candles still burning. There were 25 candles. Surui was a bit confused. Li Ruobing hadn't disappeared. He was still living in the villa. Time hadn't been reset. This meant that the curse of Surui's reincarnation had been broken. 25. Surui laughed loudly, even feeling an urge to cheer. My life has finally returned to the right track. No one knew how Surui had endured through countless cycles. Infinite reincarnations, at first, sounded magnificent and lucky because he could do anything he wanted without worrying about the consequences. Be a hero, be a villain, be an assassin, be a powerful minister. In countless cycles, Surui had experienced almost every profession and perfected them. He became everyone's best friend, learning all their secrets. He thought he would feel incredibly free, but he was wrong. He quickly grew bored. There was hardly anything left in the world that could interest him, nothing to stimulate him anymore. No matter what great feats or evil deeds he accomplished in the cycles, they would all vanish with the reset of time. He couldn't influence anything, and all his efforts were erased. The business empire he built would disappear again in the next cycle, vanishing into nothingness. The underground black empire he destroyed would rise again, running rampant. His close comrades who fought alongside him would look at him with indifference and wariness when they appeared again. The girl who once fought alongside him, sharing life and death, would become a stranger to him. It was all meaningless. Time had turned Surui into a freak. He could only extend his skills to the extreme in infinite time. King of soldiers, business tycoon, medical genius, peak driver, youngest political star. Surui once held countless brilliant titles, and these skills didn't reset. They were the only thing keeping him going. Otherwise, he might have gone mad from the endless cycles. But now, Surui had finally broken free from the cycle. His gaze grew determined as he realized he was essentially a glitch in the system of this world. When the sword is drawn, who can challenge him? He was relieved that he hadn't wasted countless years before, hadn't let the indulgent, luxurious life erode his willpower. This all-knowing mind and all-powerful body were the best proof of that. No one would willingly stay ordinary. To reach the pinnacle. Fame, wealth, and power. These were the things a person pursued in life. Even if reincarnated a billion times, human nature wouldn't change. Surui's personality was destined to chase the peak, to stand above all others. Aren't you feeling well? Li Ruobing frowned. Although time hadn't reset as Surui claimed, she wasn't angry. From the beginning, she hadn't believed him, she just thought Surui was interesting. It's nothing, I'm better than ever. Surui shook his head, seemingly realizing that his earlier state had startled Li Ruobing. He waved his hand and said, "Come, eat some cake with me." Heh. Li Ruobing's tone turned indifferent again, completely different from the passion and clinginess from last night. "I have work at my company, no time to waste here with you." In her mind, what happened last night was just a casual encounter after a night of drinking. Although she gave her first time away, there was no way she would allow him to tie her down and make her his subordinate. Surui suddenly smiled. Wasn't it just about putting in investments? How much do you need? I'll get it for you. After one night, you're going to get me money. What do you think I am? Li Ruobing stood up, her long, slender frame towering over him. There was an oppressive tone in her voice. Remember this last night, I slept with you. Surui, somewhat helpless, spread his hands. This woman was really too dominant. Is playing this game of face really interesting? Surui took off his upper shirt. In a previous life, Li Ruobing had told him her company needed funds to expand, around 180 million. 200 million. It'll be in your account by 5 o'clock this afternoon, no later. Surui raised an eyebrow, holding up one hand. Now, you have no worries, right? You Li Ruobing stood up. Her tall frame was about 1.78 meters, and there was a sense of superiority in her posture. What do you mean? Don't be so cold. We were so harmonious last night. Are you turning your back on me now? Surui waved his hand at her, nonchalantly saying, I still prefer the way you were last night. Come over here and feed me some cake. Let us talk about who really slept with who. Chapter 4, The Undercurrent of Mingju Company, Li Ruobing's Crisis. Tongju City, Central Hospital. In the luxurious ward on the top floor, Lin Chenyu looked pale, with a bandage wrapped around his head, and he was wearing a ventilator and a pulse monitor. Lin Jiatao has a gloomy face. He is 52 years old this year, but he is well maintained and has a slicked back hair. At first glance, he looks a bit like Chow Yun Fat in God of Gamblers. At this moment, Lin Jiatao was sitting on the sofa by the window smoking. Looking at his son who was covered in wounds, he felt inexplicably irritated. A short and plump woman, wearing heavy makeup, sat in front of the hospital bed wiping her tears. Can you please stop crying? The doctor said it's just a concussion. You're crying like you're brain dead. Madame Lin was like a cat whose tail was stepped on. She was furious. Lin Jiatao. You have been in Tongju for so many years, and your son has been beaten so badly, and you dare not even fart. Are you still a man? You only know how to be rude to me. If you have the guts, go find the bastard who beat your son like this and bring him back. If you don't dare, I will chop him up with my own hands. Just shut up. How many times have I cleaned up his mess? If he wasn't my son, he would have been hacked to death hundreds of times. Lin Jiatao felt a headache and was shaking with anger. He has ended up like this because of you. Do you know who he offended? The Nanningsu family. Su family. Mrs. Lin obviously didn't know the details of the conflict last night. When she heard Lin Jiatao's words, she was a little confused. Although she was still angry, her tone softened. Su family, you can't bully people like this. How many times have I told you to? This is an emergency, tell him to keep a low profile. No one listens to me, he's just showing off all day long. It would be fine if he picked on two people with no background, but he was so blind as to provoke the Su family. Not only will he be punished, but I will also have to apologize to them. Lin Jiatao's eyes were red. What favor has Director Su done to the Lin family? I'm old, and my face has been thrown into the Pacific Ocean. Then he is also your own son, how can you ignore him? Lin Jiatao glanced at his son lying on the hospital bed. Although he expressed extreme disappointment, how could he not feel heartbroken? He is my son. What kind of luck must I have in my previous life? I think he is my father. Lin Jiatao turned around and cursed. Where are you going? Mrs. Lin asked in a shrill voice. I'm going to call Director Su and kowtow to him and apologize. Lin Jiatao spoke in a harsh tone and slammed the door and walked out. At the door, Lin Jiatao's personal secretary came up, dialed a number, and handed over the phone. The call was connected quickly. Hearing the voice coming from the other end of the phone, Lin Jiatao's expression changed quickly, and he smiled. Hello, Director Su. Hello, last month's dividends have been transferred to the finance department, but you haven't signed for them yet. I just want to confirm that I have received them, right? Okay, I thought the account was wrong. It's nothing serious, it's just what happened last night. It was pretty embarrassing. My kids are young and ignorant, please don't take it to heart. The voice on the other end of the phone suddenly paused, then became a little confused. Huh? Last night? What happened? You see, your family didn't tell you, right? It was last night at Phoebe's bar that Qianyu had a quarrel with your child. Lin Jiatao still had a smile on his face and never mentioned the fact that Lin Qianyu was beaten up. He. Director Su's voice became a little strange. Old Lin, are you short of money again? Are you trying to get me to do something? My children haven't been to Tongju recently. Lin Jiatao's body froze. The personal secretary next to him gently touched Lin Jiatao's elbow. A video was playing on the laptop, which was the private surveillance footage in Phoebe's bar last night. A clearly processed photo was captured separately. Su Rui. Lin Jiatao's smile was a little stiff. He looked at the screen on the computer and said softly, Director Su, I'll send you the photo. Can you help me take a look and identify it to see if it's your family member? Okay. Director Su agreed promptly. The photos were quickly sent to Director Su's private email address. 5 minutes later, Director Su's reply arrived. Very simple. Only 4 words. No such person exists. There seemed to be some kind of terrifying aura in the air. Bang. Fuck you. Lin Jiatao kicked over the medical closet in the hallway. His face was terribly gloomy. He pointed at the photo on the laptop and said, I've been around all my life, and now I'm old, I'm still being tricked. Find him. Find him right now. Bring him back to me before the evening news starts. Pagani driving on the viaduct. Li Ruobing rubbed his brows gently. She has been very upset about the group's affairs recently, so she went to the bar to relieve some stress. The new store is about to open, the land contract has been signed, the notice has been issued, the factory has been contacted, but the money has not yet arrived. Several banks that were willing to lend money to Mingzhu Group suddenly changed their minds at the critical moment of the opening of the new store and refused to lend money to Mingzhu Group on the grounds that the audit qualifications were insufficient. Someone has stuck a nail in your company. Su Rui smiled. He knew very well what kind of family Li Ruobing was born into. Besides, this incident was caused by your family. To be more precise, it was your stepmother who caused it. There are the most conflicts between stepfamilies, especially among such wealthy families. The crux of the conflict is nothing more than property and power. You are too strong, which makes your stepmother and brother feel greatly threatened. Even if your brother is the legitimate son, you will suppress him completely in the future in the Li family. Therefore, your stepmother took advantage of you before you could fully rise up and played a trick to make you unable to recover and forced to fall. Su Rui said that this was very easy to understand. The key was that Li Ruobing's younger brother was too weak and did not show any strength or talent to compete with Li Ruobing. Li Ruobing had an indifferent expression, and there was no sign of anything unusual. How much do you know about my family? A lot, more than you can imagine, Su Rui said calmly. There are many things that even you don't know, but I know them like the back of my hand. So, what do you want from me? Li Ruobing finally turned around, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. Don't tell me it's because of a one-night stand or a man's responsibility. Save that for fooling others. Su Rui shook his head. This woman was so calm that it was scary. She could still be so rational towards the man who had taken away her virginity. Don't underestimate your own appeal, interests, status, Su Rui said word by word. I want them all. Not a bad reason. Li Ruobing closed his eyes, looking a little tired. Wake me up when we get there. Today is the day when Mingzhu Company holds its board meeting. As the CEO, Li Ruobing cannot be absent. She has a lot of things to deal with today, such as those shareholders who have strongly opposed her before. They will definitely not miss the opportunity to break the capital chain and will launch a fierce attack on Li Ruobing, trying to bring her down. When establishing Mingzhu Group, she did not use any resources from her family. This resulted in the situation that although she was the CEO, there were many shareholders in the group and the members were not united. In the past, she could rely on profits to suppress those shareholders who were trying to take over, but today, I am afraid it will be difficult to pass this hurdle. Have you ever thought about asking your father for some money? Tens of millions or even hundreds of millions, as long as you ask, he will definitely give it to you. Su Rui spoke again, looking at Li Ruobing with a playful smile. The Li Group is the family that has truly reached the top in Tongju City and one of the top business giants. Even Lin Jiatao, who has risen rapidly recently and is in the limelight, has to lower his head and accompany the Li family as a junior when he meets them. This is the true background of a wealthy family, which cannot be compared with that of a nouveau riche. Li Ruobing didn't say anything, but Su Rui knew very well that she was an extremely strong-willed and almost stubborn person. After returning from studying abroad, she did not choose to work in the family group but started her own business, which proved this point. It is not in her character to ask her family for help if she encounters any difficulties. You want to reach the top on your own and abandon the title of a descendant of a wealthy family. Your sights have never lingered on the family group. The smile on Su Rui's face became even more intense. Li Ruobing had never thought about inheriting the family. She wanted to build a business empire that belonged only to her, and she had never thought about competing with her good-for-nothing brother. Your stepmother and brother are really pitiful. They are extremely cautious and treat you as their biggest competitor and keep making moves. But they didn't expect that you didn't even consider them as your opponent. Short-sighted, Li Ruobing said coldly with a contemptuous tone. The Pagani was parked downstairs of a commercial building. The money has arrived on time. Su Rui looked at his watch and saw that there were still 2 hours left. Just wait quietly and see how I can help you complete the reversal. The roar of the engine sounded, and Su Rui drove away. There was only one sentence floating in the air. Remember, 5 o'clock. Li Ruobing watched Su Rui walk away quietly. A young girl in professional attire ran out from the building behind him. Mr. Li, all the shareholders are here, and we are waiting for you. Li Ruobing nodded, turned and walked into the lobby. Chapter 5: The Real Big Shot, SEC Marriott. Su Rui drove out of the city center and went straight onto the highway. Then, we got off the highway near the suburbs and slowly drove forward along a newly built provincial road. Not long after walking, I saw the road ahead blocked by several modified BMWs. 2 or 3 young men with pink hair and hip-hop clothes were leaning against the car doors, whispering to each other. The sound of the Pagani's engine caught their attention. They turned their gaze here, with obvious confusion in their eyes. Aren't we all already there? Whose Pagani is this? Is anyone late? Go and ask. The 2 young men looked at each other and walked towards Su Rui. Dude, you're not from the club, right? The young man looked at the luxury car Su Rui was driving and saw that his face was unfamiliar. He said politely, the road ahead is closed. If you want to play, let's do it next time. Su Rui raised his eyebrows and said in a gentle tone, I have already agreed with our Hao before. I am late because of something. Why don't I call our Hao? Brother Hao's friend. The young man paused for a moment, then smiled and said, let me ask you something, buddy, wait a moment. Su Rui nodded. Hello, can you hear me? A Pagani is coming down the mountain. He says his Hao's friend. He looks young. A young man held a walkie-talkie and hid far away. However, with his extraordinary hearing, Su Rui still heard the content of their conversation. The license plate number is from the local area, ENEN. About 30 seconds later, the young man came back with a smile on his face. Brother, this is your first time here, let me take you up. This newly built road has many forks. Su Rui chuckled and shook his head. No need, I'm quite familiar with this dish. The accelerator roared, Pagani created a gust of wind, and went straight over the BMWs blocking the road, disappearing from everyone's sight. Whose son is this? After Su Rui left, a young man was a little confused. Why don't I have any impression of him? You can get to know all the friends that Brother Hao made. The young man holding the walkie-talkie laughed and said, "We should be at the same level as them. We just need to do our job well." "That's right." The young man nodded in agreement, then glanced at the cars on the side of the road, eager to try. "How about we go for a round, too?" "Forget it. Today, I sent over 20 supercars to the mountain. Now I look at my BMW, which looks like a tractor." "That's right. Brother How just has connections. Any one of these friends is a top figure. This is called socializing among the rich." Pagani driving on the winding mountain road. This is a newly built road that is not open to the public. The mountainous area under the road is private property. On the mountainside, on the reclaimed grassland, there is a luxurious villa. More than 20 limited edition sports cars were parked on the side, their engines started, making roaring noises from time to time. The individual value of each of these cars is more than 20 million, and the suspension, engine and control systems have all undergone extreme modifications, so the cost is doubled, making them truly sky-high priced supercars. On the vast platform at the top of the villa, Surui also saw an aerial photography helicopter. There are very conspicuous words on the fuselage, indicating its identity. CCS Supercar Club. He has almost won over the entire Tongju, as well as several surrounding cities, and the top second-generation wealthy families. The appearance of Pagani naturally attracted their attention. Several young people stood at the door of the villa, frowning, as if someone recognized the origin of the car. "It looks like it's the car of Mingzhu Company. The Li family." "No, the situation of the Li family is a bit complicated," someone explained. Although the CEO of Mingzhu Company is the daughter of the Li family, Mingzhu Company has nothing to do with the Li Group. It is an independent company outside of the Li Group and belongs exclusively to the daughter of the Li family. "Har har, you are proud daughter of heaven, and you started from scratch," someone next to her laughed. "A beautiful CEO is hundreds of times better than those socialites and pretty girls." Standing in the first place was a very elegant young man wearing gold-rimmed glasses, with a neat short flat head, a spotless white shirt, and even his nails were trimmed very evenly. It was obvious that he was an extremely self-disciplined person. Although he looks young, his eyes are deep and steady, which is not in line with his age. The young men standing behind him all seem to be secretly following him. His name is Marriott. The owner of the CCS Supercar Club is also the leader in these second-generation circles. "Brother How, do you know anyone from the Li family?" someone nearby asked. "Haven't you always looked down on their second son?" Marriott narrowed his eyes and shook his head slightly. Because he saw the Pagani stopped, and a stranger got out of the car. Surui stretched and waved in this direction in a very familiar manner. "Look around the surrounding environment. Well, still so familiar. Brother How." Surui was quite polite and walked over. "I don't think we know each other." Marriott raised his eyebrows. He had always heard that the CEO of Mingzhu Group had a cold personality and almost no man could touch her. But now, a strange man drove Li Mu's car and swaggered into his club. "Won't we know each other if we meet once?" Surui said with a smile. "That makes sense." How nodded. He was in Tongju City, and he was able to win over so many rich second generations, not only because of his family's strength, but also because of his excellent emotional intelligence. He stretched out his hand and said, How. Surui. Surui shook hands with How. "What do you want to talk to me about?" Marriott asked, crossing his arms over his chest. "I want to run 2 laps. Surui pointed to the rugged mountain road with a faint smile on his face. He knew How's personality and his hobbies very well. "Brother How, you won't be unwelcome, right?" Marriott is not a native of Tongju, but a descendant of one of the top wealthy families in Beijing. The family has amazing power, and even has a general who holds real power. It is not at the same level as their wealthy business families in Tongju City. But Marriott did not stay in Beijing, but chose to move down to Tongju City, where it leisurely opened a supercar club. Marriott loves cars. They even spent huge sums of money to buy this mountain area, build mountain roads, and purchase helicopters, just to enjoy the thrill of unbridled racing. So, Surui started with the car. "Har har, those who come to see me, How, are all my friends." How laughed as soon as he heard the purpose of Surui's visit. "It's just that your car doesn't seem to have been modified. The tires are not suitable for this kind of high-intensity mountain road. The grip is too low. If you go too fast, you will be thrown out easily. These winding mountain roads were recently built and protective measures have not yet been fully established at some corners. There are cliffs of nearly 100 meters outside the mountain roads. Once the car is thrown out while speeding, there will be no trace left. If the hardware is not enough, the technology will make up for it. Surui raised his hand, pointed to the end of the mountain in the distance, and said calmly, "I have nothing, but I have good technology and courage." Marriott burst out laughing. "Why, brother Hao, let's have a race." Surui smiled, guiding Wan Hao's emotion step by step. "Just think of it as a competition between new friends." Surui directly extended an invitation to Marriott. The scene was quiet for a while. "Har har buddy, you are challenging brother Hao." Someone in the crowd on one side looked a little surprised. "You've hit a wall this time. Brother Hao, you've run in the ROC before. World Championship. Every contestant is a world-class professional racer, and ROC is a true pinnacle showdown. Marriott's strength is unquestionable. In the whole of China, there are only a handful of drivers who can compete with him, and they can be counted on one hand. We've been bullied for so long, and finally there's a newbie who doesn't know how high the sky is and how deep the earth is, challenging brother Hao." Someone was making a noise, and the look in his eyes when he saw Surui changed, as if teasing, come on, come and watch brother Hao bully the weak ones." Marriott gently pushed up his gold-rimmed glasses, a faint, very strange smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. "You are the first one who dares to look down on me by racing against me with an unmodified Pagani." Marriott's tone was very gentle, but Surui could still hear the deep-seated anger. You can't blame him for this. Anyone would be angry if they were treated in such a frivolous manner in a field where they are extremely good at. "I want to compete with you. I hope you won't let me down." Marriott shook his head expressionlessly. At this time, he had confirmed that Surui came here on purpose to cause trouble. But who is he? How could he, who had once fought against world-class drivers in the professional arena, take Surui seriously? "Xiao Han, go get my car." Wan Hao ordered a follower and glanced at Surui. "Don't worry, I won't bully you too much. I will let you see my taillights." Surui spread his hands and smiled casually. Not long after, a Koenigsegg appeared, rolling over the road with a deafening roar. Slowly, it stopped at the same position as the Pagani. Just a meeting. Surui judged that this Koenigsegg had been modified. Its chassis was extremely low, the weight of the body seemed to have increased a lot, and the center of gravity was very stable. Driving on a winding mountain road is different from driving on a straight line. The vehicle cannot just pursue speed, but also stability so as not to drift sideways when taking a turn. This car should have been specially modified by Marriott for driving on winding mountain roads. The engine has also been modified. Surui heard a dull knocking sound amid the roar. It was the sound of the improved cylinder piston running, which could increase the intake volume. It has to be said that Marriott is indeed worthy of the title of top driver. Just talking about this modified car, its level is extremely high. It does not blindly pursue speed, but chooses the most appropriate modification method according to the different road conditions. "I'll give you one last chance to take back what you just said," Marriott said indifferently. "I have no habit of taking back what I have said." Surui smiled, turned around and opened the door of Pagani. "Brother Hao, please enlighten me." Chapter 6. The race was aborted midway. Surui's real purpose. Wan Hao chuckled and leaned over to get into the car. "This guy is a bit too arrogant. Those who act arrogantly like brother Hao usually don't end up well. I look forward to seeing his expression after he loses the game." "Guess how many meters brother Hao is behind him?" someone asked. The news that the two were going to compete soon caused a commotion here. Most of these second-generation rich guys had experienced Wan Hao's driving skills and were badly beaten. Now when they heard that there was a newcomer who wanted to challenge Wan Hao, they immediately became interested. Buzz! Buzz! Pagani and Koenigsegg stopped at the parking line at the same time. The helicopter on the top of the Villa slowly rose up, stirring up a strong wind, and someone held a camera ready to record and broadcast the entire process live. "Are you ready?" Through their windshield, Wan Hao and Surui made OK gestures at the same time. 3, 2, 1. He waved the long flag in his hand downwards, and almost at the same moment, a strong wind blew up. The roar of the engine echoed through the mountains. The two cars shot out at the same time like arrows shot from a bow. On the straight route, Koenigsegg's advantages are fully utilized. The huge intake volume drives the engine piston, generating unstoppable potential energy, like a silver ghost, rampaging through the mountains and fields. All I could see was a gust of wind. Brother Howe's methods are still as violent as ever. Through the live broadcast, people saw the actual situation of the game. When it comes to acceleration from 0 to 100 km/h, Koenigsegg is the boss, someone said with a pout. That's not right. Pagani is biting so hard. Someone noticed something unusual. Behind the Koenigsegg, the jet black Pagani was chasing closely, keeping a distance of less than 5 meters from the car in front, and the distance was constantly shrinking. Howe has slowed down after turning the corner, Xiaohan said with eyes wide open, pointing at the Pagani on the live screen. Fuck. Am I seeing things? He seems to have sped up. Everyone rubbed their faces, hardly able to believe their eyes. A thrilling engine roar sounded, and Tsurui had a blank expression on his face. He had run along this mountain path countless times in his reincarnation. He knew exactly the angles and spacing of the curves, as well as the extreme deceleration point. It's almost like a muscle memory. He looked through the car window at the Koenigsegg beside him, chuckled and shook his head. This is not an equal match per se. Marriott relies on a modified engine and superb talent while Tsurui relies on his superb driving skills accumulated through billions of reincarnations and his incomparable familiarity with the track. It is clear at a glance which one is more powerful. How can the skills acquired in one lifetime be compared with those acquired in tens of millions of lifetimes? Everyone was shocked by the live broadcast. As the two cars passed the first corner, their rankings had changed. Pagani leads the way. Koenigsegg chases. The gap between the two sides is 3 parking spaces. Marriott's face looked very unhappy. Turning in a straight line was his strong point, but he was surpassed by Tsurui. It was like someone stepped on him in the area where he was best. I feel a little upset. However, he adjusted his mindset in an instant. The mountain road is long and has countless bends. Temporary victory or defeat cannot determine the final outcome. Passing a bend again. Marriott licked his lips, turned the steering wheel to the limit, stepped on the accelerator to the bottom, and the tail swung violently. The Koenigsegg's body was almost pushed sideways, and its tires rubbed violently on the ground, raising a pungent burning smell. The car body shook violently and almost overturned, but finally stabilized. Brother Howe is beautiful. The crowd cheered. But only Xiaohan frowned. Although Marriott's dangerous move shortened the distance between him and Tsurui for a short period of time, he was ultimately unable to catch up with him. This Pagani is so weird. In almost every turn, it is able to respond in the final, most extreme position without consuming a single ounce of potential energy. Although he didn't want to admit it, the distance between Brother Howe and Tsurui was indeed gradually widening. Too extreme, too dangerous. Xiaohan stared at the live broadcast screen. There were several times when the wheels of Pagani almost hit the rocks or were suspended in the air, but he always managed to turn danger into safety at the last moment. This person is probably the king of the professional racing field. A fine layer of sweat appeared on Marriott's forehead. It was not until now that he felt that something seemed to be wrong. Even though he tried his best, the distance between the two sides was still getting bigger and bigger. Damn it! Marriott didn't dare to relax at all. In fact, from the first corner, he couldn't catch up with Tsurui. Although his car has been modified, the effect of the modification is not as great as imagined. In a duel between professional drivers, the victory or defeat is often decided within a few seconds, and the role of the modification is to shorten these few seconds. But Tsurui gave him a feeling that these few seconds were gradually extending. It will soon become a dozen seconds, dozens of seconds, or even a few minutes. Is this guy a world-class driver? But why haven't I heard of his name? There is another turn ahead. Marriott, who was extremely confident in his turning skills, felt a sense of powerlessness when he saw the curve again. On a straight line, he can still chase Tsurui by relying on the powerful power of Koenigsegg itself, but once passing a curve, the strength of both sides becomes immediately apparent. Crunch! The violent friction sound was heard again. When Marriott turned the corner, he was suddenly stunned. In the sight ahead, Pagani disappeared. In a trance again, Marriott slowed down slowly and turned around, only to see Pagani stopped at the end of a fork in the road. Surui was leaning against the car with a smile on his face, waving at him slowly. What does this guy want? Marriott frowned, but still stepped on the accelerator, drove off the main road and headed towards Surui. Suddenly, something unusual appeared in the live broadcast of the villa. Fuck! Where's the car? Brother How and that guy, why did they all disappear? Deep in the deserted fork in the road, Wan How pushed open the car door with a cold expression. Mr. Wan, I'm sorry to talk to you in this way. Surui took the initiative to extend his hand, smiling gently. There are no outsiders here, we don't have to worry about our conversation being eavesdropped. Who are you? What's your purpose in looking for me? At this time, Wan How was already very clear that Surui came to him not just to race with him, otherwise he would not have used this way of avoiding people. I need some money for an emergency. Surui said it very straightforwardly, without any concealment. In return, I will tell you the truth about the assassination attempt against you 3 years ago. I can even help you turn the tide. Marriott's body suddenly froze. A long time. His face was grim as he unbuttoned the top 2 buttons of his shirt. A hideous scar across the neck to the heart. Chapter 7, Family Grudges. The truth behind the assassination 3 years ago. These words made Wan How's expression suddenly become sharp. His look was stern and his eyes were like an eagle, as if he wanted to see through Surui completely. Who are you? Marriott's voice no longer had the laziness and gentleness it had just had. It had become cold and stiff. He stared at Surui in front of him, his mind constantly working. This person took the initiative to approach me. This guy has amazing driving skills. This person attracted my attention, avoided everyone, and took myself to a remote mountain path. Tell himself that he knows the truth about the assassination 3 years ago. This guy seemed to be very confident. It was not that he had only a superficial understanding of himself, rather, he really knew what he had experienced. Marriott has a special identity. The family behind him is so huge that it is suffocating. As for what happened to him, only some people of high enough status and some extremely important family leaders had heard of it. This guy named Surui either really has some abilities, or he is related to that group of assassins. Boss Wan, relax a little. I have nothing to do with those people who want to kill you. Surui smiled. I am not a direct descendant of some big family in Beijing, but I do know something about you. Marriott's expression remained indifferent. This explanation could not satisfy him. You must have roughly determined who the person who wanted to kill you was, otherwise you wouldn't have avoided him so far away and chosen to hide in Tongju, becoming an idle driver and club owner. Surui spoke again, pointing to the scar on Wan How's chest, and said, Are you so afraid of your brother? Marriott's face turned pale instantly. If Surui's words just now shocked him, then at this moment, he felt that Surui was a little scary. He is from a famous family in Kyoto, a favored child of heaven, and is loved by everyone. He once thought that he would live a beautiful and carefree life, but an accident 3 years ago woke him up. A premeditated car accident, a ruthless knife, almost sent him to hell. There were 3 people in the car at the time, Marriott's driver and his girlfriend. It was an assassination, 2 people died and 1 was injured. The killer escaped. For 3 years, Marriott has never stopped searching, but there is still no trace of the killer. The killer seemed to have disappeared. Later, Marriott carefully analyzed and deduced, and came to a result that made people shudder. The person who wanted to kill him might be his biological brother Wan Cheng. When he was assassinated, the Wan family set up a tight net throughout Kyoto, and the only people capable of sending the murderer out were those within the family. Marriott quickly recognized the truth. This was a brutal power struggle. His elder brother attacked him in order to fight for the inheritance rights of the Wan family. But he never mentioned these things to anyone afterwards. He pretended to know nothing, stayed away from his family, and said he wanted to go to Tongju City to recuperate. This raising process lasts for 3 years. He did not give up his desire for revenge, but due to his lack of strength, he had no choice but to endure it. Opening a supercar club is also to win support for oneself. These second generations are destined to inherit the family in the future. By then, he will have the power to compete with Wan Cheng. You really surprise me. Wan How's eyes were bright. He took out a silver grey Colt M1911 from the car and slapped it on the hood of the car. If you lie to me and don't give me a satisfactory explanation, You will never leave here alive today. Su Rui had no doubt about Marriot's courage. He really dares to kill people here. But Su Rui smiled and shook his head, and shook his palms, and several yellow bullets were thrown up. Boss Wan, without this, how can you kill me? Marriot's face changed and he gently pulled the trigger. Sure enough, the sound of empty gunshots was heard from inside. When did you? Marriot's face looked ugly. Boss Wan, we don't need to test each other. Su Rui threw the bullets into the cliff beside him. I am not your brother's man, and he can't invite me. Marriot's expression slowly calmed down. Just as Su Rui said, if he was really Wan Cheng's man, killing him would be a piece of cake. Can we talk now? Su Rui asked. What can you give me? Marriott calmed down completely. That killer is not dead. Su Rui said, squinting his eyes, as if recalling, he should be in a coastal city now, living a life of debauchery. Marriott's expression changed again. He originally thought that after the killer's failure, Wan Cheng would secretly get rid of him in order to avoid the news leaking out, but he didn't expect that the killer is still alive. How do you prove it? Su Rui took out his cell phone, replaced the card with a new one, found a number and dialed it. The phone was busy and no one answered. It lasted for nearly 30 seconds before a prompt tone came from the other end, indicating that the other party had hung up. Dial again and hang up again. Dial again and hang up again. It was not until the fourth time that the call was finally connected, but there was no sound on the other end, as if someone was waiting for Su Rui to speak first. I think it's so hard to get through to your phone call. You've wasted so much of my time, Lu Zhanyan, right? There's a delivery for you. Su Rui's voice suddenly changed, with a dialect from some remote area, which was very familiar. There was silence on the other end of the phone, as if someone was thinking. Hello. Hello. Can you hear me? There was finally a response from the other end of the phone. The sound was hoarse and heavy, like an old bellows. I'm not Lu Zhanyan, you called the wrong person. Buzz. Hearing this voice, Wan Hao's body suddenly froze, and then his face suddenly changed, veins popped out on his forehead, and his breathing became heavier and heavier. Extreme rage, but trying hard to suppress it. He was very familiar with this voice. During the assassination, he did not see the killer's face clearly, but the dashcam in the car recorded the murderer's voice. For the past 3 years, this voice has been replaying in his mind every late night. Now, this voice rings in my ears again. Nothing has changed. The identity information of this number is fake. Su Rui shook the phone screen, but you can check where the source of the information is in its call records. This shouldn't be difficult for you. Marriott stared at the communication records on his phone for a long time. After a long time, he slowly calmed down, looked at Su Rui and said, "This is a big gift, tell me, how much do you want?" A smile appeared on Su Rui's face. "No, Mr. Wan, this is not a transaction, we can be friends." Chapter 8, Force the Emperor to Abdicate. Pearl Company. Meeting room. The sky outside the window was a little gloomy, making the atmosphere even more solemn and heavy. A sense of oppression is coming upon me. Mountain wind is coming. There was a hint of solemnity in Li Ruobing's eyes as he looked at the shareholders who were sitting in 2 rows on both sides. 12 shareholders. No more than half of the people are in the same camp as him. To outsiders, she is the CEO of Mingzhu Group, surrounded by many halos, glamorous and beautiful, a favored child of heaven, but only she herself knows that sitting in this position, there are countless pairs of eyes hidden in the darkness, quietly watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. How tiring is it to engage in intrigue? Those who have not experienced it will never know. Okay, everyone is here. Among the shareholders below, there was a short, fat, greasy middle-aged man with a bald head and a big belly. His figure was a bit like some kind of livestock kept in a pen, and his appearance was quite disgusting. He coughed lightly and looked at Li Ruobing, who was sitting in the main seat with a playful smile. "Boss Li, is it time to start?" Li Ruobing glanced at him indifferently. The greasy middle-aged man is called Hu Guangyi. He is a powerful vice president of Mingzhu Group and also the largest shareholder besides Li Ruobing. The shareholding ratio is 9.8%. His ideas have always been inconsistent with Li Ruobing, and he has publicly opposed Li Ruobing's decisions many times. Let's start. Li Ruobing nodded. The meeting must continue. Hiding is not her character. Okay, this meeting is mainly to study the issues related to the Chentang new store. Hu Guangyi was confident and slowly opened a file in front of him. He said, I believe everyone is paying attention to this matter. The new store is about to open, but the funds have not yet arrived. I would like to ask all the shareholders who strongly supported the development of the new store, what should we do now? Is it wrong for Xinjiang to develop this project? Hu Guangyi's words were very sophisticated. He never mentioned Li Ruobing in his speech, but instead pointed to several shareholders under Li Ruobing. But everyone knows that the decision to open the new store was made by Li Ruobing. Although this question was directed at the shareholders, it was actually directed at Li Ruobing. Chentang is an economic development zone, and a new commercial center will be established soon. Our decision on the development of Xinjiang was correct. An old man frowned. He was a staunch supporter of Li Ruobing and had a keen eye for business investment. Investing in the Chentang development zone is a sure win. Hu Guangyi laughed and shook his head. Mr. Bai, let's not talk about how Chentang will develop in the future. The problem we are facing now is that the news notice has been released, the merchant settlement agreement has been signed, and a construction site is waiting to settle our bill, but we have no money to pay. Hu Guangyi did not argue with Bai Lao over the long-term interests, but pointed directly to the capital chain. If the new store cannot open on time, we need to pay the merchant a penalty of up to 300%. What's more important is that once the news is released, Mingzhu Company's new store will not be able to operate normally, which is likely to attract widespread attention from the society. Coupled with the media's hype, it is likely to affect the normal operation of the old store. Who should bear this responsibility? Hu Guangyi's eyes were grim as he scanned the crowd, finally stopping on Li Ruobing. Quiet. There was dead silence in the conference room. I'll take care of it. Li Ruobing spoke indifferently, flipping the file page in front of him with his hand. I've read the report. The new store will probably need 180 million yuan in funds to operate. I'll take the money. When Hu Guangyi heard Li Ruobing speak, a hint of triumph appeared on his face. Okay, that's what I want you to say. Mr. Li, it's not that I don't trust you, but the old store's account has no money to support the new store, and as far as I know, several banks have rejected your loan requests. I wonder where you are going to get the money from. Hu Guangyi licked his lips, his expression a little aggressive. If you are deceiving us, we can't follow you and be frightened in vain, right? You have a big family and a lot of wealth, so you don't care about Mingzhu Company. Even if it collapses, you can always make a comeback. But we are different. The shares of Mingzhu Company are our life and property. Li Ruobing had a blank expression on his face as he took out an asset appraisal report. Shoot it on the table. I have already had 2 properties in Bishui New District appraised and found that they are worth more than 100 million yuan. Hu Guangyi raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect Li Ruobing to do this. For a descendant of a wealthy family, selling his house for the sake of a company might seem shameful to others. But Li Ruobing doesn't seem to care about these. But we still need nearly 80 million. The smile on Hu Guangyi's face was still grim. He knew Li Ruobing's character and would not ask the Li family for help, so he was a little unscrupulous. Mr. Li, do you have other channels to get this money? Li Ruobing was silent. Mr. Li, how about this? According to the current situation, I think you are no longer suitable to be the CEO. All shareholders should vote and re-elect someone who is capable of dealing with this crisis to become the new helmsman of Mingzhu. The real purpose is revealed. Hu Guangyi finally showed his fangs and exposed his ambition nakedly. Yes. You can't let us go bankrupt along with Mingzhu. If Mr. Li can't handle it well, just replace him with someone else. I didn't agree to open a new store in Chentang at the beginning, and now something went wrong. Oh. Some shareholders echoed the voice. Old Bai frowned and said, everyone, when Boss Li helped us make money, you didn't even say a word of thanks. Now that we're facing a little risk, you're forcing us to step down. Ask yourselves, without Boss Li, would you have been able to earn this much wealth? Hu Guangyi blinked his eyes, leaned back in his chair, crossed his legs, and said with an exaggerated smile, Mr. Bai, when doing business, the most important thing is to put profit first. If we can make money, of course we support it. If we can't make money, there is no need for us to gamble with our lives, right? Boss Li, we will follow your lead. If Mr. Li is not capable, he should step down and let someone more capable do the job. Although Mingzhu was founded by Mr. Li, it also belongs to us shareholders. It is our right to elect the CEO. The conference room was filled with noise. It was obvious that Hu Guangyi had done enough work with the shareholders before the meeting started, and now as soon as he spoke, he got the support of most people. I don't agree. Mr. Bai was very determined. He looked around with a cold gaze, stared at Hu Guangyi and sneered, "Old Hu, don't think I don't know what you are planning. You want to get promoted. You are just a nouveau riche. Do you know how to run a company? Do you have the ability to get the company through a crisis?" Har har. Hu Guangyi's eyes were cold and he scratched his scalp. "I really have it. Let me tell you, if I were the one in charge of Mingzhu, I could take out 180 million at any time." Hu Guangyi's words have been very straightforward. He was the one who proposed today's board meeting in order to seize power. Li Ruobing does have some means. But the deficit of 180 million cannot be made up just by her saying so. "Let's vote by raising our hands," Hu Guangyi said with a smile. He was confident and had made sufficient preparations. "Those who agree to re-elect the CEO, please raise your hands." At one point, 7 shareholders expressed their support. According to the equity inventory, the equity of these 7 shareholders has reached 52%, which means that proposal passed. Wait. According to the board's regulations, the board has no right to change the company's CEO unless he has committed a serious fault. Old Bai said in a deep voice, his face terribly gloomy. He didn't expect that Hu Guangyi's hand had reached so deep that more than half of the shareholders chose to support him. The capital chain is broken, the new store cannot operate normally, and it may even cause social public opinion. Is this not a serious fault? Hu Guangyi laughed exaggeratedly. "Mr. Bai, I think you are old and your eyes are blurry. You have lost even the most basic judgment." Har har har. There was laughter in the meeting room. In Xinjiang, the deadline required by the construction site is before 6 o'clock tonight. Li Ruobing suddenly spoke, staring coldly at Hu Guangyi. "I will raise the money. When the time comes, if there is no money in the account, I will resign. If the money is in the account, you have to pay a price for what you said just now." Hu Guangyi felt cold sweat on his forehead as Li Ruobing stared at him. This woman is indeed too strong. In the past, I found it difficult to muster the courage to speak loudly in front of her. Even though she was forced into a desperate situation at this moment, I still felt a little bit of fear. But thinking of the person behind him, he mustered up his courage again. As long as that person is around, Li Ruobing will never be able to turn the tables. "Mr. Li, why do you have to keep saying such useless angry words?" Hu Guangyi licked his lips, as if he was sure of victory. "Even if you want to sell your property and car, it will take time. Now it's only an hour and a half away from 6 o'clock. You are the founder of Mingzhu. We respect you and want you to leave with dignity. Why do you have to keep pestering us and make yourself look undignified? You dare to talk to me like that? There must be someone behind you supporting you, right?" Li Ruobing said coldly, "After the matter of the new store is over, I will talk to you about our relationship." The tone is cold. Hu Guangyi couldn't help but shudder, but recovered in an instant. "You should solve the funding problem first. 180 million, 1.5 hours. That's what you said." He was not worried at all that Li Ruobing would be able to complete the reversal at this last moment because, as mentioned before, the sale of real estate and vehicles would take time. And even if she sold her house and car, the money she had would not be enough. Although the shareholders who supported Li Ruobing had good intentions, they did not have much money. Li Ruobing had a blank expression on his face. He opened the address book on his phone and stared at a number for a long time. Finally, "I chose to call." She has made her decision. Chapter 9, 200 million to reverse the situation. Sell part of your own shares. This is the only way she can resolve the current crisis so far. As for what Su Rui said before, she didn't take it seriously at all. She never puts her hopes on others. The call was connected quickly. "Help me evaluate how much the 7% stake in Mingzhu company is worth. I want to sell it now." Hu Guangyi's pupils constricted, and then he couldn't help wanting to burst into laughter. Li Ruobing actually wanted to sell 7% of his shares. This is tantamount to drinking poison to quench thirst. Although it can alleviate the company's financial crisis in the short term, it will further reduce Li Ruobing's control over the company. After selling these 7%, Li Ruobing will only have 24% of Mingzhu company's shares left. When the equity is diluted to a certain extent, she will be kicked out. Not even shareholders can do it. "Mr. Li, Mr. Bai was anxious. He knew very well that, especially in this situation, the buyer would lower the price based on your eagerness to sell. The selling price of these shares might be only about 70% of the market price. We can't do this. The shareholders on Li Ruobing's side were also panicked. On the other hand, on Hu Guangyi's side, all the shareholders had ambiguous smiles on their faces. Har har har. Mr. Li is really talented and courageous. Hu Guangyi gave a thumbs up, but I have a suggestion. Instead of selling it to others, why not sell it directly to me? Li Ruobing looked at him with disdain and ignored him. Selling shares to individual investors is only a temporary solution as long as the new store can operate normally. She is confident that she can buy back the shares within 3 years. She remains Mingzhu's largest shareholder. But if it was sold to Hu Guangyi, the result would be different. He is a greedy wild dog. Once the shares are in his hands, he will only become more aggressive. The market value of the shares you want to sell is 58.27 million. If you want to sell it tonight, we will help you contact the seller, but you will need to pay a 3% commission. Hearing their voice coming from the phone, Hu Guangyi laughed coldly. He lowered his head, edited a text message and sent it out. I want to see the money before 6 o'clock. Li Ruobing said. Hu Guangyi's phone vibrated. After seeing the reply message, the smile on his face became even wider. As long as Li Ruobing dares to sell, this 7% stake will eventually fall into his hands. This is the promise of the person standing behind you. Mr. Li, this is still not enough. Hu Guangyi smiled sinisterly and glanced at the Rolex on his wrist. Mr. Li, you don't have much time. Please help me deal with the several cars under my name as well. Li Ruobing spoke again and said to the staff of the assessment center, I will have someone send the relevant documents over later. I watched as the secretary took the relevant documents and trotted out of the meeting room and headed straight for the appraisal center. Har har, Hu Guangyi rubbed his face, looking at Li Ruobing in trouble. He suddenly felt a sense of pride. Li Ruobing, you have come to this day. As for the funds, he was not worried at all. Someone will make arrangements to sell Li Ruobing's shares and real estate after 6 o'clock. He wants both equity and Li Ruobing's resignation. Oh, Old Bai sighed deeply, feeling very aggrieved. Wait a minute, Hu Guangyi smiled, took off his watch and put it on the table, as if to remind Li Ruobing, Mr. Li, I suggest you pray that there will be no traffic jam near the trading place. Li Ruobing had a blank expression on his face, leaning back in his chair with his eyes closed. A little tired. Hey! Sir, this is a meeting room, you can't enter. How can you steal something? I'm calling the police. There was a commotion in the corridor. As messy footsteps sounded, the door of the conference room was suddenly pushed open. It's quite lively. Didn't I tell you to wait for me? Su Rui stepped into the meeting room and glanced at the many shareholders. Finally, he stopped at Li Ruobing, who was in the main seat. What's going on? You want to sell your house and your car. In his hand he held a file bag, which contained the equity certificate and property certificate that Li Ruobing had just given to the secretary, asking her to take to the trading office. He placed it on the table in front of Li Ruobing. Be good and put it away. The secretary appeared at the door of the conference room in high heels, looking apologetic. Boss Li, he rushed in as soon as he came up. I didn't stop him. Li Ruobing raised his eyebrows. Hu Guangyi suddenly had a bad premonition in his heart. He frowned and looked Su Rui up and down. He doesn't look like a rich man, but there is something wrong with his attitude towards Li Ruobing. What do you do? Do you think anyone can come here? Hu Guangyi slammed the table, thinking to himself that he should give this guy a warning first. Where did you come from, you vagrant? Get out. I heard a dog barking from far away. Turns out it was you. Su Rui smiled brightly, and his fingers made a crackling sound. Bang. Crash. 2 loud bangs. Hu Guangyi only felt that the world in front of him was distorted, and his body instantly knocked over the seat and the decorative vase next to it, and flew out. A slap. Hu Guangyi flew 2 meters. Spit out 3 molars. A shrill scream that did not sound like a human voice was heard, and everyone present felt their hair stand on end. No one expected that Su Rui would be so decisive and violent. Do you know where this is? I want to call the police. A shareholder who supported Hu Guangyi trembled and took out his mobile phone. I'll teach you a lesson for your attitude towards investors. Is that okay? Su Rui's smile remained unchanged, warm and gentle, as if it was not him who had just made the move. In the past, if you had said a dirty word, you would have been dead. Quiet. It was dead silent. Hu Guangyi finally reacted. His face was swollen and bloodshot, his eyes were extremely sad, and veins bulged on his forehead. In the palm of his hand, 3 bloody molars lay quietly. You dare to hit me? Fuck your mother. I want you to spend the rest of your life in jail. If I don't kill you, I won't be named Hu. Is it out? Su Rui ignored Hu Guangyi, who was barking like a wild dog, and turned to look at Li Ruobing. What are you doing here? Li Ruobing asked. I'll help you vent your anger, and by the way, enjoy the pleasure of turning the tide. Li Ruobing frowned. The sound of high heels was heard outside the door again. The difference from before was that the owner of their voice seemed very flustered and excited. The door to the conference room was pushed open again. The manager of the finance department appeared in front of everyone, looking extremely excited. Mr. Li, the company's account just received a transfer of 200 million yuan. The transferor is SCC Club, Marriott. It was like a loud thunderclap. Hu Guangyi's pupils gradually shrank and his face became stiff. Bai Lao's eyes widened, and then he started laughing loudly. Old Hu. Now let's talk about what you just said about my poor eyesight. Chapter 10, I'll help you clean up a batch. Smooth and comfortable. Old Bai only felt that the blocked energy that had accumulated in his chest dissipated in an instant. 200 million, on time. Su Rui smiled, pulled out a chair, sat next to Li Ruobing, glanced at the shareholders again, and said, everyone, please continue. Su Rui's words were polite, but after taking one look at Hu Guangyi's miserable condition, several shareholders chose to remain silent. It's not simply because of fear, but because the funds are already in place. No matter how much trouble they make at this point, it will be of no avail. The outcome of today's battle has been decided. 200 million. Hu Guangyi's face was full of disbelief. He really couldn't figure out where Li Ruobing got the money from. Impossible, you must be lying to me. You just don't want to lose the bet. One of the shareholders opened the laptop in front of him and tapped a few times on the keyboard, then his expression became a little complicated. Brother Hu, it's true. Hu Guangyi was completely confused. The funding chain was reconnected and his previous plans were completely shattered. Boss Li, I admire you. Mr. Bai laughed, then looked at Su Rui with a strange look in his eyes. Who is this? Good friend. Su Rui answered before Li Ruobing could, a very good one. I understand. Mr. Bai was in a good mood and his tone became ambiguous. The atmosphere in the conference room suddenly changed. I don't care what kind of dog you are. If you hit me, you can't leave today. Hu Guangyi's wish was not fulfilled, and he was hurt by the slap. His mentality suddenly collapsed and his face was ferocious. I want both your legs. Su Rui looked normal, but his eyes were slightly narrowed, revealing a dangerous light. This person is really uninteresting. Su Rui stood up and walked forward again. Do you want to beat him to death here? Li Ruobing suddenly spoke. This kind of bastard should be beaten to death. Li Ruobing reached out and grabbed Su Rui's sleeve and pulled him back. And this action, in the eyes of bystanders, reveals another message. The relationship between the two is not simple. Very close. The conflict did not occur in the meeting room after all. Okay. Just wait, this matter is not over yet. Hu Guangyi was stopped by someone. He spat out a mouthful of bloody phlegm, and his expression was so gloomy that it seemed like water was about to drip out. He is not a gangster, and it is impossible for him to really have a fight with Su Rui in a commercial building. Years of business practices have made him accustomed to it. If there is any problem, just solve it privately. However, Su Rui's slap was too hard and too direct. He couldn't save face in public. With the 200 million in revenue, all the conflicts in the board of directors were resolved. The shareholders, with different expressions, found reasons to leave one after another. Hu Guangyi did not call the police in the end. He knew very well that his injury could only be classified as a third-degree minor injury at best. With Li Ruobing around, there's no way Su Rui would go to jail for several years just for this little thing. And more importantly, he was unsure. He didn't know Su Rui's background. The noisy meeting room soon became quiet. Bai Lao looked at Hu Guangyi's embarrassed back, frowned with disdain, and cursed in a very vulgar way, this son of a bitch, he deserves to be beaten like this. He had long disliked Hu Guangyi and his gang, because they were too snobbish and opportunistic, but that was not the main reason. What Bai Lao could not stand the most was that these idiots had no skills in running a company, and yet they always wanted to get to the top and be the boss for a few days. The company is a 10,000-ton cargo ship sailing on the vast ocean. As their helmsman, you have to have the ability. This Hu Guangyi has no means to run a company, and his ability to intrigue and scheme is as bad as two people's. If this continues for a long time, he will be so annoying. When Su Rui heard this powerful curse, a smile appeared on his face. This Mr. Bai is the leader of the group of people in the company who truly support Li Ruobing. He can be said to be the second most important person in Mingzhu. He is loyal and capable. Su Rui had a good impression of him and respected him sincerely. Uncle Bai, Li Ruobing reminded. Look at my brain, said Mr. Bai, patting his shiny head as if he had suddenly realized something, and laughing loudly. I forgot there was a lady here. Pay attention next time, be sure to pay attention. Okay, go ahead and chat. I won't be a light bulb here anymore. Mr. Bai was very tactful. He walked out of the meeting room with a smile, leaving the private space to Su Rui and Li Ruobing. Snap! The door to the conference room was closed again. In the quiet room, only Su Rui and Li Ruobing were left, looking at each other. The note on that transfer is Marriott of SCC Club. Li Ruobing narrowed his eyes, with a scrutinizing look in his eyes, and asked, do you know Marriott? She naturally knew very well what kind of person Wan Hao was, as well as his family background. In Tongju City, he was considered an absolutely powerful figure. In addition, Su Rui used words to pressure Lin Jiatao last night. Putting these two things together, Li Ruobing couldn't help but think that Su Rui's identity might not be as simple as it appeared. She checked Su Rui's information. For the first 24 years of his life, he behaved in an unremarkable manner and was a completely ordinary person. But the more this happens, the more abnormal it becomes. Is it possible for ordinary people to know Marriott? Can an ordinary person easily ask Marriott to give him 200 million yuan? Is it possible for an ordinary person to make Lin Jiatao bow his head with just a phone call? The fog surrounding this man is getting thicker. We just met this afternoon. We had a great conversation and it felt like we had met too late. Su Rui smiled. He was telling the truth, but he concealed some details. As a friend, isn't it normal for you to give a few 100 million to support me? He. Li Ruobing smiled silently. Only a ghost would believe such words. Forget it, let's not talk about this and follow me. Su Rui stood up and glanced at the watch on his hand. I have booked a dinner at the Ritz-Carlton. There is still an hour and a half before that. I will take you to do something. Do you know why you are so passive today? Su Rui's expression became serious. You were forced to abdicate by your own men and almost had to sell your house and car. Absolute controlling rights. Almost in an instant, these words flashed through Li Ruobing's mind. When you hold more than 51% of the shares, no matter what those shareholders say, they can treat it as bullshit. Su Rui said word by word, there are too many shareholders in Mingzhu Company. I will help you clean up a group of them. Too many shareholders. In the endless stream of cars, Li Ruobing opened his mouth, but couldn't help wondering how to clean it. Clean up a batch. These words themselves carry a solemn meaning. Coupled with Su Rui's previous violent methods, Li Ruobing couldn't help but think of some bloody scenes for a moment. Don't worry, I won't use such low-level and dangerous methods. Su Rui smiled. He knew very well what Li Ruobing was thinking, but he deliberately kept it a secret and asked, did you get the money I asked you to withdraw? What can you do with 3 million? You can buy 20% of Mingzhu Company's shares. Su Rui said casually. Li Ruobing had a strange expression on his face. How is this possible? Previously in the conference room, her 7% stake alone could be sold for tens of millions, but Su Rui now said that 3 million could buy 20% of the shares. Sometimes, the value of equity is not measured by money alone in life. There are always some things that are more important than money, Su Rui said. When you grasp a person's weakness and thoroughly understand his character, you will know that it is very easy to defeat him. The vehicle slowly drove into a villa area. Li Ruobing recognized that this was the address of Li Xichen, a shareholder of Mingzhu Company. He holds 5% of the shares of Pearl Company. Belongs to Hu Guangyi's faction. Okay, wait for me here. Su Rui instructed and took out a black leather suitcase from the storage box of the vehicle. I'll go up with you. No need. Surui shook his head and refused. With you here, there are many things that I can't do and many things that I can't say. Surui didn't want to expose too many of his cards to the public too early. Only by maintaining a sense of mystery would others be in awe of and interested in him. Just like Li Ruobing, although he had it with her once, Surui did not think that she would obey him from then on. A relationship between a man and a woman without affection and time to develop is ultimately fragile. If you want to win over a strong-willed woman like Li Ruobing, you have to act more powerful and mysterious than her. Marriott's 200 million is just the beginning. Chapter 11, Money or Life, which is more important? In the living room, Li Siqing looked a little tired. As he turned 40, his energy began to decline. His bald head, beer belly, and the blood pressure medication he always carries with him all remind him that he is old. However, he still doesn't want to admit old age. He is not satisfied with his current life and wants to go further. What happened at the board meeting today was somewhat beyond his expectations. The plan was aborted. If the original script had been followed, Hu Guangyi would have taken over after Li Ruobing was forced to step down. Then, within Mingzhu Company, those who belong to Li Ruobing's faction will soon be removed from important positions, and as the second in command of Hu Guangyi's faction, he will naturally be able to prosper and get a powerful deputy general manager in charge of finance. It is much better than the current empty shell with no substance. But the young man who appeared out of nowhere and the 200 million completely shattered his dream. Fuck it. Li Siqing took out his cell phone and dialed a number. The call was connected quickly. Hey, old Hu, what's going on? Didn't you say that Li Ruobing has no other channels to make money? This time we finally got those fence-sitters to stand with us and directly express their attitude, but in the end, nothing was accomplished. How passive our people will be in the company in the future? Li Siqing said bluntly as soon as the call was connected. There was a noisy sound from the other end of the phone, accompanied by the sound of clothes rubbing against each other and footsteps, and then it gradually became quiet. That's what my wife promised me. If it doesn't work out, what can I do? Hu Guangyi's voice was obviously leaking something. Fuck. Let's find another opportunity. Let our people keep a low profile recently. Don't let that woman catch us. Okay then. Li Siqing sighed helplessly. What are you doing now? Filling a tooth. Hu Guangyi said bitterly, this little bastard. I have stopped doing anything else recently and just study him. Be careful. This guy dares to be so reckless. He must have some power. Li Siqing said, I think you'd better call your wife and ask her to help check this guy's background. The two of them whispered to each other in low voices. Bang. The sudden noise made Li Siqing stunned for a moment, and he subconsciously covered his phone. Mr. Li, nice to see you again. Just as I was in a daze, Surui walked up the stairs with a bright smile on his face. Is it you? Li Siqing's body suddenly tensed up. Surui left a very deep impression on him today. Surui pointed with his index finger, signaling Li Siqing to hang up the phone. What are you doing here? Li Siqing cooperated and hung up the phone directly, then crossed his legs and leaned on the sofa. He was not worried that Surui would dare to do anything wrong here. This is a wealthy area, and there are security guards patrolling every day. Talk about a deal with Mr. Li. Surui threw their black suitcase directly on the table in front of Li Siqing. There is 1 million in it. Sell me your shares in Mingzhu Company. The smile on Li Siqing's face froze. He had a strange expression on his face, leaned forward to listen, laughed exaggeratedly and asked, did I hear correctly? 1 million to buy 5% of my shares. Are you stupid? Or do you think I'm stupid? He. Surui smiled, touched his nose, and walked forward. Why, you still want to fight me here? Li Siqing narrowed his eyes, picked up the cigarette, slowly exhaled the smoke, and sneered, breaking into a private residence and violently assaulting even Li Ruobing can't erase this crime for you. It seems that Mr. Li knows a lot about the law. Surui sighed and sat opposite him, then crossed his legs and put them on the expensive rosewood table. He tilted his head and asked with interest, then I would like to ask Mr. Li a legal knowledge. Excuse me, breaking into a private house, killing someone and burying a body. Which of the two is more serious? The smile on Li Siqing's face froze. After a long while, he sneered and pointed directly at the door, saying, I don't know what you are talking about, please get out. He was gambling, gambling that Surui didn't know the truth of the matter and was just trying to trick him. Because that matter is really too big. Enough to destroy everything he has now. Lin Village, sheepfold, under the locust tree. Surui spoke calmly and spit out a few locations. Buzz. Li Xiqing only felt that his head was hit hard by a sledgehammer. For a moment, I lost all ability to think. Like being struck by lightning. Mr. Li is doing very well now, with a luxurious house, a luxurious car and a beautiful wife. I wonder what Hu Yunshan would think if he saw this under the locust tree. Surui looked at Li Xiqing with a smile and said, "How about I help you dig him out and let him see if his former brother has changed?" "Who are you?" Li Xiqing's face turned ugly and ashen. "That's enough, stop talking. This incident is the deepest shadow buried in his heart." "I don't think it's enough. And I see murderous intent in your eyes." Surui said lightly, "Do you want to kill me too?" "I don't." "Really? Then what is your right hand doing now?" Li Xiqing swallowed his saliva, his right hand touching the pistol under the table. He looked at Surui with complicated eyes. "If you're within 2 meters, I'll let you shoot first." Surui smiled. "Silence. Silence." Li Xiqing's tone finally softened. He gave in. Murder is the most serious crime. The circumstances are extremely serious, 100% death penalty. He gritted his teeth and asked, "Did Mr. Li ask you to come?" "She can't control me yet." Surui said, "But this share was indeed bought for her. Can you let me meet Mr. Li?" Li Xiqing's face was pale. "That is 5% of Mingzhu Company's shares. The market value is nearly 50 million. But now, Surui only gave him 1 million. I have been following Mr. Li since Mingzhu was founded. We have a bond. Can you let me meet Mr. Li?" Li Xiqing began to beg. He was considered a veteran of Mingzhu. He joined when Li Ruobing just started the business. He had experienced some things, but in the end he chose to part ways with Li Ruobing and joined Hu Guangyi's camp. "I have worked in Mingzhu for 2 years, and I only have this little share. Without it, I can't live. The little bit of friendship between you two has disappeared since you decided to support Hu Guangyi in the meeting room today." Surui frowned and said slowly, "If I hadn't seen that you have helped Mingzhu with many contributions, I would have played you to the point of jumping off the building. Even if I jump off the building, that 5% of shares will not be yours." Li Xiqing shouted in a low voice with red eyes. "That depends on you. What choice do you make? Life or money?" Surui said slowly, and then added, "Let me remind you, if you die, your son will inherit the shares. Do you think your big-breasted and brainless wife and your son can beat me? Don't they have any black material? We have a conflict, and you drag my family into it." Li Xiqing gritted his teeth, "You want to kill me all? Are you still a human being? I am shameless, I am a bastard, I am insidious, I am despicable. In short, don't try to use this kind of moral argument to restrain me. I won't buy it." Surui narrowed his eyes, like a king cobra ready to bite anyone at any time. "Besides, you are a murderer, what qualifications do you have to negotiate with me?" After taking a look at the watch on his hand, Surui licked his lips, took out a document and placed it on the table. "Your wife and son will be home in 3 minutes. Make a decision before then. I don't want to embarrass you in front of your son." Li Xiqing stared at the document, then turned around and looked at the black leather suitcase. Gritted his teeth. 3 minutes later, Surui went downstairs alone. The difference from before was that the black leather suitcase in his hand was gone. "Open the car door." Surui threw a document to Li Ruobing. There are some big words on the cover. "Share transfer certificate. 10 minutes. 1 million. Li Xiqing was out. Chapter 12. Don't worry. Ask if you want to ask. Some things will cause problems if you keep them in your heart. Surui looked up and smiled. Of course Li Ruobing was very curious. No, it was not just curiosity, she even felt a little confused. "How did you do it?" Li Ruobing looked at Surui with a serious expression. "I'm not kidding you. A contract signed under personal threat has no legal effect." Yes, Li Ruobing still suspected that Surui used some violent means to force Li Xiqing to surrender. "You underestimate me. I have a much more thorough understanding of the law than you do." Surui smiled. "Things like violence and coercion are only done by brainless people. I just said that everyone has secrets and weaknesses. No matter how powerful a person is, if you find that weak spot, one punch will be enough to kill him. Li Ruobing's eyes were deep. Just as Surui said, everyone has secrets and weaknesses, but there is no doubt that everyone will cover them up tightly. It's easy to defeat a person by relying on his weakness, but it's difficult to find that point. Surui, how did you know? Even if you hit Li Xiqing's weak spot and make him sign the contract, what about the rest of the people? Li Ruobing asked, will they all be coerced by you? Surui smiled and shook his head. Coercion is only the most basic means. Those who can become shareholders of Mingzhu Company have more or less unclean backgrounds, Surui said, shaking his finger. But this is not the only way to make someone change his mind. A person's personality, habits and hobbies, interpersonal relationships, and family composition are all areas where we can start. For example, if a shareholder has a withdrawn and violent personality, then the method used against Li Xiqing may not work on him. He may even rebound strongly, and both he and I will be doomed. Therefore, I have to change my attitude and not let him feel that he is under a strong threat. For example, another shareholder dotes on his son, and his son happens to be a good-for-nothing. I can use his son as a bargaining chip. If he is willing to sell his shares, I will sign a contract with him. From now on, a portion of Mingzhu's annual profits will be permanently allocated to his son to solve his worries. Some are greedy, some are lustful, some are eccentric, and some are slick. I use different methods for different people. Surui's expression was very casual as he gave examples to Li Ruobing one by one. But Li Ruobing felt an inexplicable fear. Surui's statement was a complete analysis of human nature. What he said may seem simple, but if it is put into practice, it will be invincible. If you want to defeat a person, you not only need to know his secrets, but also everything around him, his character, his bottom line, what he fears, and what he cares about. Forcing a person with an introverted and violent personality will definitely backfire. To lure those who are greedy, use beauty to lure them. To attract those who are lustful, use profit to win them over. One mistake and you will fail. For this method to be successful, it requires unimaginably complex information. Li Ruobing had investigated Surui's information. He was just an ordinary citizen. But the more she investigated, the more frightened she became. Could it be true what he said about being reborn billions of times? Or does he have a mysterious disguise that even he himself cannot see through? If it's the latter, that's terrible. Pagarni soon stopped at a residential area. Li Ruobing frowned. It seemed that none of the shareholders of Mingzhu Company lived here. This is the house Zhang Xinzhong bought for his mistress. Surui explained, pushed open the car door and said, okay. Wait for me in the car for a while. This time, it will probably take a little longer. About 20 minutes. Surui smiled and picked up a black suitcase again. Everyone's situation is very complicated. You won't understand it if you go up there. If I have time later, I will explain it to you slowly. Surui was very keenly aware of the disappointment in Li Ruobing's eyes. He chuckled. It seemed that this woman had begun to become extremely curious about the abilities she had demonstrated. This is a good start. Surui's figure disappeared into the residential area. There was silence in the car. Li Ruobing narrowed his eyes, took out his cell phone and dialed a number. Help me check this Surui. I want all his information from birth. Including his friends and family. The more detailed the better. A puzzled voice came from the other end of the phone. Mr. Li, haven't you checked it? Confirm again. After giving the order, Li Ruobing hung up the phone and closed his eyes to rest. 25 minutes later, the car door was opened again. Surui smiled and handed Li Ruobing a document identical to the previous one. It took longer than expected. Surui touched his nose and smiled strangely. I didn't expect that Zhang Xinzhong would be playing role-playing games with his mistress so early in the morning. They didn't notice me, so I watched for a while longer. Hee, although that woman doesn't have a good figure, the uniform she wears is still pretty nice. Disgusting. Li Ruobing was very direct, his eyes cold. Don't worry. In Tongju City, apart from you, no other woman can catch my eye. Surui said very bluntly. Surui's likes and dislikes for women are not based solely on appearance. More importantly, Li Ruobing has a unique temperament. Like a rose on an iceberg, cold, beautiful and proud. One glance at it will make people feel ashamed of themselves. But the more such a woman is, when her body and mind are conquered by you, you will get unprecedented satisfaction. Li Ruobing looked indifferent and said mockingly, should I feel flattered? A person who speaks harshly dislikes his integrity. Su Rui smiled and did not continue talking to Li Ruobing. Time was running out and he needed to go to the next destination. In the next hour, Su Rui arrived at 5 residential areas or hotels in Tongju City, and the duration of each stay varied. Because the people you are talking to are different and the methods are different, there will be differences in time. Before I knew it, it was almost 7:30 in the evening. After talking to the last person, Su Rui walked out of the tea house. The difference is that this time, it was not just Su Rui who showed up, but also a couple. Li Ruobing was stunned for a moment, but did not get out of the car. Mr. Su, take care. The graceful middle-aged man shook hands with Su Rui, with a warm smile on his face, and his tone was even a little flattering. I'm sorry to trouble you with that matter. We are all friends, and it is only natural for us to help each other. Su Rui nodded politely, paused, and said, board meeting. Don't worry, the middle-aged man said firmly, I will unconditionally support Mr. Li and will never let you down. Chapter 13 Lin Jiatao takes action. We can do our work now. Su Rui got into the car, glanced at his watch, and said with a smile, there's still time. Su Rui smiled brightly. Li Ruobing looked at the 6 share transfer documents in front of him and felt a little dazed. Not true. It's so unreal. 3 million, 20% of the shares of Mingzhu Company. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she would have thought she was dreaming. Li Ruobing really didn't know what to say to express his inner shock and uneasiness at the moment. What's wrong? Su Rui tilted his head. He knew Li Ruobing's inner thoughts very well, so he smiled deliberately and said, do you feel that all this is like a fairy tale? A beautiful princess is in danger, and a handsome prince wields a sharp sword and wipes out the enemy in an instant. The princess pledges her love to him. This is a great story, Li Ruobing said. Her eyes and eyebrows were like paintings, but her voice was very compelling. It's a pity that I'm not a princess, I'm a queen. Su Rui burst out laughing. The queen also needs to marry and you are destined to be mine. Su Rui smiled, and very gentlemanly grabbed Li Ruobing's fingertips with his right hand, sniffed her body fragrance, and invited, I wonder if your majesty is interested in having dinner with me. You're sincere. Li Ruobing's lips curled up slightly, I accept your invitation. No words along the way. In front of the Ritz-Carlton. The Pagani slowly stopped. Su Rui pushed open the car door and was about to hold Li Ruobing's arm. Suddenly, there was a sound of tires rubbing violently. Far away. The 2 GL8s rushed over in an extremely brutal manner, cutting in front and behind the Pagani, completely blocking its way out. The car door opened, and a dozen sturdy young men in suits jumped out of the car. They moved very quickly and had cold looks on their faces. What is particularly eye-catching is that their waists are bulging, obviously because they are wearing weapons. We've been waiting for you for a long time. A dozen domineering young men quickly surrounded Su Rui and Li Ruobing. 4 or 5 of them blocked Su Rui's retreat in an extremely aggressive manner, and put their right hands on their waists, with an unspoken threat. Their movements were very skillful, with a sense of iron-bloodedness, and their knuckles and index finger joints were covered with calluses. This is the mark left by frequent gun handling. The leader was a young man in his 30s with a buzz cut, a cold expression, a strong physique, and a height of 1.9 meters. At first glance, he looked a bit like Jet Li and bodyguard from Beijing. Very fierce temperament. Li Ruobing frowned. This scene did not scare her. As the eldest daughter of the Li family, what she had seen and heard since childhood had made her will extremely strong. Who are you? Li Ruobing asked with a stern tone, staring into the eyes of the young man with the crew cut, who asked you to come. The young man with the buzz cut glanced at Li Ruobing and ignored him. Instead, he looked at Su Rui calmly and said, someone has spoken. Come with us. Su Rui narrowed his eyes, took a step to the right, and blocked Li Ruobing slightly, without showing any nervousness. What if I don't go? He knew very well who these young men in black belonged to. In this life, he just beat Lin Qianyu up last night, and other than that, he had not offended anyone at all. The identity he told Lin Jiatao last night was also fake. With just a simple investigation, his real identity could be found out quickly. But Su Rui didn't expect that the Lin family would come so quickly. And the timing of their appearance also made Su Rui very unhappy. He was about to have dinner with Li Ruobing and was in a good mood, but suddenly a group of people jumped out to disrupt the situation. No one would feel happy if it were him. Then we will break your legs and carry you away. The young man with a crew cut looked cold. The tone of the young man with the crew cut was not cold, but rather quite calm, but the more so, the more terrifying it seemed. A dog that really dares to bite people will not bark. Don't you know me? Li Ruobing's face was icy. In Tongju City, there were still people who dared to block her way and wanted to take her away in this way. This was simply an insult. Get out. The young man with the crew cut shook his head indifferently. The boss pays and we do the work. We don't need to know anyone other than the target. Decisive and tough. Li Ruobing sneered and took out her cell phone. In Tongju City, there were really few people who were qualified to stop her. Not to mention Lin Jiatao's subordinates. Even if Lin Jiatao himself came, he would have to treat her as an equal. Par. A young man saw Li Ruobing take out her cell phone and grabbed it directly from her. We follow orders, don't make things difficult for us. Having said that, the young man's hand showed no mercy and pressed down on Li Ruobing's wrist in the shape of an eagle claw. If this squeeze was too severe, Li Ruobing's arm bones would need at least 3 months to recover. There is the sound of wind whistling in my ears. Li Ruobing looked at the claw fist that was getting closer and closer to him, and his pupils constricted. But this claw stopped abruptly less than 3 centimeters away from that beautiful face. Crack. Su Rui had a blank expression on his face. His iron-like 5 fingers climbed up the arm of the young man with a buzz cut, and with a twist like an iron clamp, he broke his entire arm. The joints were twisted, and the bone spurs pierced through their muscle surface, exposing them to the air. This is not a simple fracture at all. The young man's entire arm was completely broken. The severe pain caused him to faint and go into shock on the spot. The young man with the buzz cut in the lead suddenly changed his expression, his eyes flashed with surprise, but he waved his hand and said, "Go." 7 or 8 young men in suits moved in unison, pulling out long sticks and short knives from their waists, and rushed towards Su Rui like a pack of wolves hunting. But the results were almost the same. No one could get within 1 meter of Su Rui. Boom! Crash! In less than 2 minutes, the last young man who made the move fell to the ground wailing. This was a complete crushing defeat. In Li Ruobing's eyes, the gang of tough young men didn't even have the chance to fight back. They were quickly and neatly dealt with after one contact, and their methods were extremely cruel. Whenever they attacked, the opponents had no chance to stand up a second time. Chapter 14, Boss Lin, Let Us Talk. The young man with the crew cut had his eyebrows twitching wildly. In his career, he had fought against many fierce enemies, but this was the first time he had seen a man like the one in front of him who made his brothers completely unable to struggle. Su Rui's reaction speed and skill power far exceeded his imagination. And most importantly, this man exudes a disregard for life and an extremely strong aura of death. This is an invisible deterrent that only people with blood on their hands can possess. Even if he were placed in their dark empire that brought together desperate thugs from all over the world, he would still be the top one among them. Who is this person? Why have I never heard of his name? Come on, come here. Su Rui hooked his finger at the young man with the crew cut. The young man with the crew cut took 2 steps back without making a sound. Yes, he was scared. Through observing the strength Su Rui had just displayed, he keenly judged that even if several of himself were added together, they would definitely not be Su Rui's opponent. Money is important, of course, but compared to life, it is still insignificant. He decided to abandon the mission. Because if he forced himself to attack again, he would most likely face death. Having been a mercenary for several years, he had a deeper understanding of death, but he was also increasingly afraid of the word death. Isn't it a bit late to leave now? Su Rui's steps were steady and he pressed forward step by step. We are just a knife. We will stab whoever the person holding the knife tells us to stab. The young man with the crew cut took 2 steps back again. Although his tone did not clearly beg for mercy, the meaning between the lines was self-evident. There is no hatred between us. It is useless for you to bully us. From the moment your men tried to attack her, we have had a grudge. Su Rui raised his chin slightly, pointed in the direction of Li Ruobing, and looked coldly. Even I can't bear to touch her. Who do you think you are? A whip kick that was so fast that it was unimaginable, like a 1,000-pound hammer, swept directly across the body of the young man with a crew cut. Bang! His body flew sideways and hit the left side of the GL8, smashing the door 30 centimeters deeper. The young man with the crew cut vomited blood, his body seemed to be falling apart, his chest was stuffy and he was short of breath, and his head was buzzing. Surui squatted on the ground, fumbled around the young man's waist for a while, and pulled out a shiny black pistol. Har har, if you have this kind of thing on you, I will kill you. It's all self-defense. Surui directly pulled the bolt of the gun and stuffed it into the hands of the young man with the crew cut. Or, you can try to kill me with one shot and then run away. Li Ruobing found it difficult to understand Surui's behavior. The situation was clearly settled, so why did he hand the gun to the other party? What if the other party becomes desperate and does something desperate? How will it end? Lin Jiatao, what did I tell you? Surui asked with a smile. I must take you back. If necessary, I can take extreme measures. The young man with the crew cut swallowed his saliva mixed with blood. Seriously injured. Disabled. Surui tilted his head. Disabled. The young man with the buzz cut took a deep breath and said, Lin Chenyu is seriously injured. Very good. Surui nodded. The young man with the crew cut struggled to stand up and wipe the blood from his mouth, but he didn't dare to touch the loaded gun. His face was pale. We are only here for the money. It's just a knife in someone else's hand. Can you give us a way to live? Surui shook his head indifferently, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised, like a devil showing his fangs. After I'm done, I'll give you a wheelchair. The young man with the crew cut had trembling lips as he listened to Surui's unquestionable words. His hands were as if he had Parkinson's disease as he held the pistol with difficulty. The muzzle of the gun moved slightly and pointed at his knee. I really shouldn't have taken this job. The young man with the buzz cut gritted his teeth and screamed, his face twisted with fear, and slowly pulled the trigger, ! Yes, he regrets it. This time, the young man with the crew cut not only suffered heavy casualties, but he also had to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. He had said before that he would break Surui's legs and carry him back, and ruin Surui's life. Now, Surui also wants his 2 legs. Fair enough. The air froze in an instant. All right. If there was any anger in Li Ruobing's heart before, it had completely dissipated now. Looking at the miserable state of the young man with a buzz cut, his voice was somewhat cold. Looking at these bloody things before dinner is really disgusting. Surui raised his eyebrows. The young man with the crew cut felt as if he had been pardoned, and his tense nerves suddenly relaxed. The oppressive and cold atmosphere began to loosen. Okay, in that case, Surui shrugged. He heard the sirens approaching and said indifferently, let's make a deal. I'll let you get away with it. Okay. Okay. Hearing this voice, the young man with the buzz cut seemed to have survived a disaster, and his whole body instantly collapsed. You say? He would do anything as long as he could get away with it. What do you think can make me satisfied? Surui glanced at the young man with the crew cut. The young man with the buzz cut had a flickering look in his eyes, as if he was having a fierce psychological struggle. After a long while, he nodded heavily. I understand. When the police car arrived, the place had already returned to calm. The 2 GL8s had already left the scene, and among the several parties involved, only Li Ruobing was left. The others had already disappeared. The captain of the criminal police team felt a bit overwhelmed when he saw Li Ruobing, because no matter what case it is, once it involves a wealthy family, the difficulty of solving it will increase several times. But no matter what, the necessary process still needs to be followed. Because this is not just a simple fight. Once there are more than 4 people involved, it becomes a violent gang. They are completely different in nature. The criminal police captain walked into the luxurious private room of Xingshi Daneng very politely, even a little stiffly, and told Li Ruobing with a smile that he wanted to know the details of the incident that had just happened. But Li Ruobing said that she knew nothing and was not involved. When the criminal police captain asked the hotel to retrieve the surveillance video, he was told that the hotel system had just been upgraded and the surveillance did not capture the incident at all. In desperation, the criminal police captain had to announce the disbanding of the team. At the same time, a Pagani was driving on their way to the city center hospital. Surui had no expression on his face and dialed a number. Hey, Boss Lin, let's talk. There was a pause on the other end of the phone, and soon, an extremely gloomy voice sounded, with a faint sneer. Okay, come on, I'll be waiting for you. Chapter 15 You Should Thank Me. Hauchi Commercial Building, Conference Room. This is Lin Jiatao's base camp. The Lin Group went public 3 years ago. Relying on the support of the Far East Chamber of Commerce and his personal skills, it rose very quickly and became the most powerful company in Tongju. There is even a vague tendency to enter the top giants. Someone once predicted that if the Lin Group continued to develop in this direction, within 10 years, it would be able to stand on equal footing with the old top wealthy families, the Li family and the Bai family. The meaning revealed by this sentence has fully proved the importance of the Lin family. At this time, the atmosphere in the Haichi conference room was extremely depressing. There were more than 20 people in the meeting room. Lin Jiatao stood in front of the French window, his face cold and silent. His aura was very powerful, and the oppressive feeling of a superior was obvious. He stood with his hands behind his back, holding 2 iron walnuts in his hands and turning them continuously. Lin Jiatao was standing and no one dared to sit down. In the conference room, a middle-aged fat man wiped the sweat from his forehead with a tense expression. He is the owner of Phoebe Bar, Wang Chen. Behind him stood a few tall and strong young men wearing security uniforms. Mr. Lin, I really wasn't in the bar last night. If I were there, even if they made 2 holes in my head, I would never let anyone hurt Brother Chen Yu, Wang Chen explained with a dry mouth. I'm not here to listen to your explanation. Lin Jiatao's eyes were cold and stern. He slowly turned around. No one dared to look at him. This happened on your territory. You are responsible. Yes, yes, yes. Wang Chen nodded hurriedly. I will make it up to you. I will definitely make it up to you. Crunch. The door of the conference room was pushed open and a young man walked in. Su Rui looked around the conference room and smiled brightly. Boss Lin, it's very lively. Lin Jiatao's expression was stern, and the iron walnut in his hand stopped moving. After a moment, he looked unfriendly and stern. You really dare to come here by yourself? He recognized Su Rui, who looked exactly like the one in the surveillance footage. As Lin Jiatao spoke, a tangible deterrent force spread out, and the temperature in the conference room seemed to drop several degrees in an instant. You are that brat. Mrs. Lin immediately turned her gaze away. Her tone was as sharp as a knife and she was extremely hostile. She directly took out a pistol from the drawer of the conference room and slammed it on the table. It was you who hurt my son for a vixen. As Mrs. Lin pulled out her gun, the meeting room suddenly became silent, and you could almost hear a pin drop. It's your honor that my son likes your girlfriend. Mrs. Lin took 2 steps forward, her ugly face exposed, aggressive and vulgar. Where is that little bitch? I want you to kneel down and apologize to my son. Bang! A whole box of red wine was thrown on the ground. Lin Jiatao casually pulled out a bottle from it, unscrewed the cork with an expressionless face, and poured out the wine inside. I'm a fair person. I'll make you pay back for what you did to my son. Lin Jiatao gently placed the empty bottle on the table, picked up another bottle, and repeated the previous action. You hit Chen Yu twice, so I'll hit you back twice. But you lied to me, so that counts. Chen Yu bows to you and apologizes. This counts as another one. Because of you, the Lin family lost face in Tongju. This counts as another one. Lin Jiatao kept moving, and after a while, the table was filled with empty red wine bottles. A rough check revealed that there were 18 of them. In Tongju, no one has ever been able to humiliate my Lin family like this. Lin Jiatao's face was gloomy. He pointed at Su Rui and said word by word, do you want to do it yourself, or should I help you? Par 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 par. Unexpectedly, Su Rui started clapping with a smile on his face. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Boss Lin, for making me understand the word fairness again today, Su Rui said with a smile, and then said, like parents, like son. Now I finally understand why Lin Qianyu was raised to be this kind of person. As soon as these words were uttered, the temperature in the meeting room dropped again. Wang Chen took a breath and his pupils contracted. Is there something wrong with this brother's brain? He has already fallen into a dangerous situation, but he still wants to say something that adds fuel to the fire. Is he really afraid of his own life and wants to challenge the bottom line of the Lin family? Bang! Veins popped up on Mrs. Lin's forehead, her face turned pale, and she raised her hand to grab the pistol on the table. I'll kill you, you little bastard. Su Rui was decisive and slapped him in the face. Bang! Su Rui's force was not very strong, but he slapped Mrs. Lin's face hard, causing her to stagger and leaving 5 red fingerprints. You are so old, but you have no manners at all. Surui rubbed his palms, as if teaching a junior a lesson. Quiet. Dead silence. The scene suddenly fell into chaos. The bodyguard behind Mrs. Lin suddenly rushed out with fierce eyes. You dare to hit me? Mrs. Lin was stunned. Nonsense. Surui frowned and raised his hand to slap him again. Bang. Crisp. Loud. 2 consecutive slaps completely broke Mrs. Lin's mentality. Her pride and arrogance were shattered at this moment. Even Lin Jiata was surprised for a moment, and then his face quickly turned very ugly. He snatched the pistol from Mrs. Lin's hand with a sneer and pulled the bolt directly. I want you to die miserably. I want that little bitch to be fucked by everyone. Mrs. Lin broke down and yelled at the top of her lungs. She has decided to use her power and connections to destroy Surui's family. This forced the woman to lose her place in Tongju and become a prostitute available to anyone. Everyone involved in this matter must pay the price. She believed that the Lin family had the ability to do so. Surui ignored him and just stared at the gloomy Lin Jiatao, smiling slightly. Boss Lin, do you really think you can defeat me? You should thank me. Do you know that? Surui ignored the muzzle of the gun that was less than 2 meters away from his head, and directly pulled up a stool and sat down, his eyebrows and eyes cold. If I hadn't taken action last night, your Lin family would have suffered a devastating disaster. Lin Jiatao was stunned, but then he slightly exerted force on the finger that was pulling the trigger and frowned again. He. Surui crossed his legs on the table, pointed his finger at Mrs. Lin in midair, and asked in a cold tone, do you know who the woman Lin Chen you fell in love with last night, the little bitch you mentioned, is she? Lin Jiatao felt that something was wrong. Because the surveillance at Phoebe Bar was not perfect and not high definition enough, he only saw Surui, while the image of the woman was always blurry. He hired someone to handle it, but there has been no result yet. Who? Lin Jiatao pondered for a moment and asked. Her last name is Li. Surui smiled strangely. Plum. Almost in an instant, Lin Jiatao thought of the Li family in Tongju. But, is it really such a coincidence? His breathing gradually became heavier, and Lin Jiatao sneered, are you deceiving me? Buzz. At this moment, Lin Jiatao's cell phone suddenly rang, and a professionally processed photo was sent to his personal WeChat. The woman in the photo has bright eyes, red lips and an arrogant temperament. Looking at the photo, Lin Jiatao's eyebrows twitched wildly, his scalp numbed, and he uttered a name with difficulty. Li Ruobing. Chapter 16 The Power of the Li Family. The 3 words were not spoken loudly, but they echoed in the conference room like thunder. Mrs. Li swallowed and the anger on her face froze. Wang Chen felt a headache. He was just the owner of a small bar and was not even a middle-class figure in Tongju City. Yet, he was involved in a dispute between 2 wealthy families. It was truly a fight between gods and the suffering of mortals. The smile on Surui's face became even more intense, with a certain confidence. In Tongju City, is there no one who dares to mess with Li Ruobing? No, although Li Ruobing is the president of Mingju Company and has a net worth of 10 billion, there are many people in Tongju City who are as powerful as her. What's important is the huge statue behind her. Tongju Li family. Although Li Ruobing's relationship with her family was not harmonious, and she even had some gaps and quarrels with her father because of her stepmother, these were no secrets. But no matter how fierce the internal struggles within the Li family are, Li Ruobing is, after all, the eldest daughter of the Li family and Li Guodong's biological daughter. If his daughter was wronged outside, would Li Guodong turn a blind eye? Lin Jiatao felt his palms were a little wet. He knew very well that Li Guodong was an extremely protective person and had a very domineering personality. If Lin Chenyu really did something out of line to Li Ruobing last night, then facing Li Guodong's revenge, Lin Chenyu would probably not just be hit with a few wine bottles. A broken leg is a minor matter. Does the Lin family have the strength to fight against the Li family? No. It should be said that not yet. But this does not mean that the Lin family has no resistance against the Li family. The 2 sides are almost equal economically. What the Lin family lacks is only the foundation of years of operation, such as connections and background. For example, in Tongju, if the Lin family and the Li family both need to get a piece of land, Lin Jiatao may need to go to several departments in person, invite people to dinner and give gifts, but Li Guodong may only need to make a phone call and the matter will be settled. The Li family is really not easy to mess with. But if the Li family really attacks Chen Yu and beats him into a cripple, will Lin Jiatao fight back or not? No fight back. Apologize humbly. Then Lin Jiatao's face would be completely lost. In Tongju, he would never be able to reach the top again, because in the eyes of others, you, Lin Jiatao, have no courage, no guts, and are not worth supporting. Not worth investing in. Being so fearful, even the Far East Chamber of Commerce behind him would probably be extremely disappointed in him. But how to fight back? In terms of relationships and connections, he has a certain gap with the Li family. If the two families go to war in Tongju City now, the Lin family will definitely be the one that falls in the end. If it really comes to that, things will be irreversible. In a sense, Su Rui's behavior did prevent this situation from happening. Lin Jiatao really has to thank him. The atmosphere in the conference room became weird. Lin Jiatao's expression changed constantly. After a long while, he slowly smiled and said, "Mr. Su, what is your relationship with Miss Li?" He. In the conference room, the attitudes between Lin Jiatao and Su Rui changed completely. The two of them chatted with friendly smiles as if they were old friends who had not seen each other for many years, and it was as if the unpleasantness that had just happened had never happened. Mrs. Lin, who was slapped twice, was very tactful and did not dare to continue to be arrogant. She knew very well who Li Ruobing was. If she really heard about the fact that people called her a vixen and a slut who could be slept with by anyone, one can imagine how serious the consequences would be. 2 slaps, not too heavy. Mr. Su, are you working for the Li family? Lin Jiatao personally brought out a set of purple clay tea sets, with the aroma of tea wafting in the air. Su Rui shook his head. I have nothing to do with the Li family. I am just friends with Ruobing. Oh, Lin Jiatao said with an I understand look, laughing repeatedly. Har, Mr. Su and Ms. Li, they are really a perfect match. Wang Chen sat aside very stiffly, serving tea and water to the two of them. Don't say that. My goal is to live a leisurely life and eat gigolos. Su Rui said as if jokingly. Lin Jiatao rubbed his fingers with a smile. He had also watched the surveillance video from last night. Su Rui's skills were the strongest he had ever seen in his life. Otherwise, he would not have sent out all his aces to capture Su Rui in Tongju. Is this Mr. Wang? Su Rui said slowly, I'm sorry for the trouble I caused you last night. What are you talking about? We are all friends. It's no trouble, no trouble. Wang Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead silently, with a humble attitude and a very low posture. Lin Jiatao lit a cigarette and looked thoughtful in the smoke. Boss Wang, calculate your losses and send them to my office tomorrow. I'll have the finance department transfer the money to you. Lin Jiatao's voice sounded, without any ups and downs. Counted in for today's lost wages. Go ahead. No. They are just some odds and ends, not worth much. Wang Chen waved his hands quickly. Lin Qianyu got into trouble in his bar, and he didn't even have time to compensate him, so how could he dare to ask for money from the Lin family? Before Su Rui came, he had already prepared to spend a lot of money. Boss Wang, are you mad at me? Li Jiatao smiled brightly and handed him a cup of tea. I was joking when I asked you to pay compensation. We are all friends, you won't take it seriously, right? Wang Chen held the teacup stiffly in both hands, feeling a little overwhelmed. All right, let's put it one way or the other. I'm not an unreasonable person. I'll compensate you for your losses, and this matter will be over. Lin Jiatao was very decisive and patted Wang Chen on the shoulder. Next time I visit you, remember to give me a discount. Of course. Wang Chen laughed dryly and took a sip of bitter tea. Lin Jiatao smiled very sincerely, and there was not a trace of falsehood in his words. But the three people present knew very well in their minds that if Su Rui had not appeared, would Lin Jiatao have said such a thing? Does he regard Wang Chen as a friend? The three of them chatted in the conference room for nearly an hour. The specific content is unknown, but when Su Rui left, Lin Jiatao sent him downstairs with a smile on his face. As he watched the Pagani drive away, the smile on Lin Jiatao's face gradually disappeared. His confidant came out from the side, holding a document in his hand. Brother, this is his information. I checked, he has no relationship with the Li family. He and Li Ruobing only met last night, and they had never crossed paths before. Lin Jiatao started out as a gangster in his early years. Even though he has gradually cleaned up his name in recent years, his brothers who started out with him are still accustomed to calling him Big Brother instead of Mr. Lin or Boss. So, he really is a gigolo. Lin Jiatao frowned. Chapter 17. Lin Jiatao. His parents were just ordinary workers. They died in a car accident when he was a child. The confidant closed the file expressionlessly. He grew up on the state's minimum living allowance. He has no background and no special experience. This kid must still think that he has intimidated me. Lin Jiatao sneered, took out a cigarette and lit it. He is still too young. Har har, the confidant laughed. But what happened today still taught me a lesson. Lin Jiatao frowned and said, our foundation is still too weak. Even a child dared to rely on the power of the Li family to beat my son and slap my wife, and I could only endure it. The confidant raised his eyebrows, thought for a moment, and said very solemnly, brother, with your words, I will let the gun go off at the Li family mansion. There is no lie or hypocrisy in this statement. Lin Jiatao shook his head indifferently. Old Han, we have moved up in social status, and our behavior must also change. The open fighting method is outdated, and we should change our way of thinking. Tongju can accommodate one top Li family and one top Bai family, but it can't accommodate a third top Lin family. Lin Jiatao explained, if we want to gain a firm foothold, one of these two top families must fall to make room for us. We can't touch the people in the Bai family who have official connections. Therefore, in the next 3 years, we will have a battle with the Li family. Instead of fussing around when the time comes, it is better to start now and quietly weaken the Li family's wings. What do you mean? The confidant frowned. Li Guodong is old, his son is useless, and the only one with ability is his daughter. Li Ruobing is destined to be the leader of the Li family in the future. And this Su Rui, if he is given time, will definitely become a powerful assistant to Li Ruobing. We have to nip him in the bud before that happens. Lin Jiatao's tone was cold, and there was a hint of ruthlessness in his words. What he was thinking about at this moment was no longer Lin Chenyu being beaten or the loss of face to the Lin family. He was thinking about the development of Tongju and the turbulent situation in the next few years. He knew exactly who his enemy was. Brother, do you think too highly of him? The confidant asked doubtfully, because Su Rui's information was ordinary. Just based on him. I've never made a mistake in looking at people. Lin Jiatao paused, then said, this Su Rui is not simple. The confidant nodded. He believed in his elder brother's judgment. Lin Jiatao had worked his way up from the bottom of society to where he is today, relying not only on courage and chance, but also on an extremely sharp vision. Go ahead, this matter must be done as soon as possible. Find 2 professionals. Price is not a problem. Lin Jiatao instructed. He had a vague premonition in his heart that if Su Rui was not eliminated quickly, he would definitely become a big worry for him in the future. If we deal with him now, will it arouse Li Ruobing's suspicion? Asked the confidant. It just so happens that if we deal with him now, we won't arouse Li Ruobing's suspicion. Lin Jiatao said, in Li Ruobing's eyes, Su Rui and I have reconciled tonight, so there is absolutely no need for us to provoke her again. And if Su Rui gets into trouble now, we will be the least suspicious. Lin Jiatao said firmly, we have different positions and are destined to become enemies in the future. Instead of waiting until he is fully grown, it is better to get rid of him cleanly now. The tone is grim. This is Lin Jiatao, a man who started as a lowly gangster and gradually rose to become a big brother in the underworld and even the head of a wealthy family. Previously in the conference room, he could change his expression in an instant, become very close to Su Rui, and bow and kneel to him. But after turning around, he became decisive and ruthless and made a brazen move. I understand. The confidant smiled, I'll prepare it right away. Go ahead. Your sister-in-law and I will have something to eat and then go back to the hospital. After arranging this matter, Lin Jiatao gave a few more instructions and glanced at his watch. It's so late, why haven't these people come back yet? Who is it? I asked the veterans from the security company to go out and capture Su Rui, but they haven't been seen for a whole day, and they didn't even return my phone calls. Lin Jiatao felt a little strange, but he didn't care, because these veterans had their own set of rules, and he didn't ask too many questions. Their salary will be reduced next month, their efficiency is too low. Suddenly, a tattered GL8 drove over from the distance. These bastards, they went out for a whole day and didn't get any work done. How come they even crashed the car? Lin Jiatao frowned and cursed, walking out of the company lobby. The GL8 was less than 100 meters away from the company's gate, without slowing down, and its exhaust pipe roared and spewed out a cloud of thick smoke. In the driver's seat, the young man with the crew cut had a struggling look on his face, tightly holding the big black star in his hand. Crash! The GL8 suddenly braked suddenly and stopped on the street less than 20 meters away from Lin Jiatao, with the windows rolled down. Lin Jiatao was just about to step over. Suddenly, a section of pitch-black gun body stretched out. Lin Jiatao's body suddenly froze. Lin Jiatao, look up! Arrogant! Gunshots rang out in the streets at 9 o'clock in the night. GL8 leaves in a cloud of dust. R. Lin Jiatao staggered and fell to the ground. The blood from his left leg kept flowing, and it instantly turned red. At a corner, Su Rui heard dull gunshots, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and then he started the car and drove away with the explosive music around. From beginning to end, there was no reconciliation between Su Rui and Lin Jiatao. Lin Jiatao knew clearly that Su Rui was Li Ruobing's man and that they would inevitably be in conflict in the future. Su Rui was also very clear about this, and more importantly, Su Rui understood what kind of person Lin Jiatao was. Insidious, cunning, cruel and ruthless, and vindictive. When he is not in power, he can be humble and tolerant like a wild dog, but once he has strength, he will surely strike you fatally without giving you any chance to react. Today he was forced to bow down to the power of the Li family. If the Li family can no longer suppress him in the future, his revenge will be extremely fierce and cruel. It is impossible for Lin Jiatao to become Su Rui's friend, nor is it possible for him to become Li Ruobing's helper. He is the enemy. He has the ambition to replace the Li family and become the top wealthy family in Tongju. Lin Jiatao is much more dangerous and difficult to deal with than Li Ruobing's stepmother. Today's Li Ruobing, without the help of the Li family, would not be a match for Lin Jiatao. It's not that Li Ruobing is not capable, but that Lin Jiatao is older and has more experience than Li Ruobing. If the world continues to follow the original path, maybe in a few years, the Li family will really fall into decline and be replaced by the Lin family. But now it's different. You're messing with my future wife's family, Lin Jiatao. You should go to the hospital and take a nap for a while. Su Rui smiled. After I help Ruobing become the queen of the Li family, I'll play with you. Yes, Lin Jiatao is indeed extremely ambitious, but his methods are cruel and clever. But in front of Su Rui, all this was like a child's clumsy trick. He thought he had disguised himself very well, but he had no idea what kind of person his opponent was. The gun belongs to Lin Jiatao. The person also belongs to Lin Jiatao. Even if the young man with the buzz cut was arrested, Su Rui would not be implicated. Just as Lin Jiatao said before, in the eyes of others, the two sides had already reconciled. Su Rui had no reason to provoke the other party, and now that Lin Jiatao was in trouble, no one would think that it was related to Su Rui. As for the motive for the crime, it is a joke that there was someone behind it. Could it be possible that the young man with a crew cut told the criminal police team that the reason he shot Lin Jiatao was because he had previously attacked Su Rui and was later counterattacked, and he was afraid of being crippled by Su Rui? Even if he dares to say it, will anyone believe it? Those who have not experienced it personally will never know how terrifying Su Rui is. In terms of dark means and cruelty, Lin Jiatao is not even an entry-level elementary school student in front of Su Rui. Chapter 18 Agreement. After doing all this, Su Rui did not waste time, but chose to return to their hotel to continue the unfinished dinner with Li Ruobing. How did you talk to Lin Jiatao? Li Ruobing asked at the dinner table. Su Rui took a sip of red wine, shook the glass gently, and said with a smile, "What else can we talk about? As soon as I tell you the name of your Li family, Lin Jiatao will want to kneel down on the spot." Li Ruobing sneered. Naturally, she couldn't believe what Su Rui said. She also knew very well what kind of person Lin Jiatao was. Although such a gangster who is a mixture of black and white may be afraid of the Li family, he will definitely not be afraid to this extent. You have to be careful. Lin Jiatao is not a simple person. Li Ruobing hesitated for a moment, but still reminded, don't underestimate him. Su Rui looked at Li Ruobing with interest, squinting his eyes, and approached her cheek with a faint smirk, sniffing the faint fragrance on her body, and whispered, "Are you concerned about me?" Li Ruobing moved back a little uncomfortably and frowned. "I just don't want the shareholders of my company to die on the street." "Yes. Li Ruobing counted the 200 million yuan that Su Rui raised for Mingzhu today as investment funds. She doesn't like to owe favors to others, because it's hard to calculate. She likes relationships that are clearly marked, crisp and clear. Su Rui spread his hands indifferently. He knew very well that it was impossible to make Li Ruobing open up to him and rely on him completely in such a short period of time. He has the time and the patience. Anyway, I still have a long time to interact with Li Ruobing, so I'll take it slow. One day, I will make you inseparable from me. I will give you a portion of your 200 million investment based on market valuation, but only 10% the extra money will be considered additional investment, and I will give you dividends in proportion. Li Ruobing said clearly, I will arrange a position for you in the company, and you can choose it yourself. I will run the new Qiantang store. Su Rui did not refuse. This was part of his plan. Within a year, I will quadruple your company's market value. Only by being close to Li Ruobing can one have long-term contact with him. Only by having one's own career can one gain a firm foothold in front of the Li family. Moreover, what Su Rui said about doubling Mingzhu's market value within a year was not bragging. Running a company is too easy for an old monster who has lived for billions of years. The business empire he once built was a multinational behemoth. Li Ruobing was silent for a moment. Qiantang new store is Mingzhu's key project this year. It can be said that Li Ruobing invested almost all of his wealth in this project. You can only succeed, not fail. Su Rui did give her a lot of surprises, but does he really have the ability to manage and operate a company? Okay. Unexpectedly, Li Ruobing agreed immediately. I will issue a letter of appointment. From tomorrow on, you will be the president of Qiantang new store. Aren't you afraid that I will bankrupt your company? Qiantang Xinjian, you also have 200 million, Li Ruobing replied coldly. If you don't feel bad, it's up to you. Isn't Li Ruobing worried that Qiantang Xinjian will go bankrupt? In fact, she cares about the profitability of the Qiantang new store more than anyone else, because it is related to whether Mingzhu can move to the next level in Tongju City. If she took the right step, from now on in Tongju City, people would no longer introduce her as, this is Miss Li Ruobing, the eldest daughter of the Li family and the daughter of the Li group, but, this is President Li Ruobing, the founder of the Mingzhu group and the youngest business tycoon. But if it fails, the consequences will be serious. Mingzhu may go bankrupt, and she will be forced to return to her family and remain silent. At an appropriate time, she would marry into a political family and dedicate the last light and heat to the Li family. This is a qualitative difference. But even considering the consequences, Li Ruobing still agreed to Su Rui's request, because she had a vague feeling that the man in front of her might really be able to bring her a surprise. This is a gamble where you risk everything. Li Ruobing resolutely placed the bet on Su Rui. Who has this courage? I really don't care about 200 or 300 million, Su Rui laughed wantonly, but if you leave in disgrace, I will be very distressed. Li Ruobing paused. Then, he said calmly, has anyone ever told you that your love words are corny? Su Rui burst out laughing. After being reborn billions of times, his life experience has made him not need to please anyone, including the women he likes. If he wants to get close to someone, he just creates opportunities according to her preferences. As for this kind of love talk, Su Rui has long forgotten how to say it. If you don't like it, I can start learning again from tomorrow. What style do you like to listen to? The domineering president type? Or the intimate uncle type? Su Rui continued to smile, and seemed to be determined to get to the bottom of the matter. Li Ruobing rubbed his eyebrows calmly, feeling a bit of a headache. She has always been cold and arrogant, keeping people at a distance. Even if a man wants to get close to her, he will be oppressed by her invisible aura. But this cold temperament that makes her proud seems to have no effect at all on Su Rui. His attitude towards me was exactly like that towards an ordinary high school student in love. Didn't make any changes because of my identity. If you really want to flirt with me, you should go get Qiantang Xinjian back on track first. Li Ruobing smoothed her hair and put it behind her ears. This was an extremely flirtatious move. She slowly exhaled a breath of wine-scented fragrance. My standards for choosing a son-in-law are very high. This statement is direct and to the point. But your mate selection criteria are not consistent with the Li family. Su Rui said with a smile on his face, the husband your father chose for you is the eldest son of the Yi family in Yangjing. With the political assistance of the Yi family, the Li family can move forward, and at the very least, it can be guaranteed to last for 100 years. Su Rui already knew everything about the Li family. Li Guodong had always wanted to get close to the strong political tree of the Yi family in Yangjing and wanted to establish a relationship with the Yi family through marriage, but he could never convince Li Ruobing, who was strong-willed and stubborn. Several negotiations ended in a bad mood with Li Ruobing overturning the table. Li Guodong was in a desperate situation, and with his stepwife fanning the flames, he forced an agreement with Li Ruobing. Didn't you make an agreement for this? Give Li Ruobing a chance to prove herself. If her business fails to achieve any results within 5 years, she must obey her family's arrangements and go to Yangjing to marry the young master of the Yi family. Li Ruobing did not refuse. Because she knew very well that being born into a wealthy family, there were some things she could not escape. If you get the superior life of a wealthy family, you have to pay some price for it. More importantly, she believed in herself and could fulfill the terms of the agreement. This is also the reason why Li Ruobing founded Mingzhu Company without using any resources from his family. But after this palace coup, Li Ruobing found that it might be difficult for him to win the agreement on his own. It's not that she is incompetent, but someone in the family has been playing dirty tricks and trying to bring her down. You even know the Li family's agreement. Li Ruobing's eyes were extremely complicated. She felt a sense of fear from the bottom of her heart. In front of this man, she had almost no secrets. She didn't like this feeling, the feeling of being seen through and suppressed everywhere. There are still 3 years before the agreement is completed. Let's put it this way. Within 3 years, I will help you in the agreement. Su Rui said directly. Also, I will make sure that when everyone mentions the Tongju Li family, the first person they think of is you, Li Ruobing, not Li Guodong. By then, no one can influence your choice. Do you want to marry me? Li Ruobing asked coldly. My biggest wish is to marry into a wealthy family and live off their husbands. Su Rui's eyes flashed with a cold and dangerous light, and he chuckled. I'm determined to live off your husband. Whether it's your father or that damn Yangjing family, get out of my way. Whoever dares to stop me will be wiped out on the spot. The sound is like a loud bell, majestic and powerful. If the content of this sentence wasn't a bit embarrassing, it might really be called heroic. Li Ruobing was speechless. Perhaps Su Rui is the only one who can talk about wanting to be a gigolo so confidently and openly. He. Li Ruobing raised her red lips slightly, revealing a charming and deep smile, and quietly approached Su Rui's ear. If you can really help me do this, I will support you in 3 years. Chapter 19 Pengguqiang. The dinner didn't end until around 11 o'clock in the evening. After leaving the hotel, Su Rui sent Li Ruobing home and left alone. The two of them are not living together for the time being, because their relationship is not yet that close. Although they had a sexual encounter last night, it was just an indulgence of carnal desires. Moreover, Su Rui also needed some space alone to come up with his own plan. After he returned to the villa area, he went back to his room, turned on his laptop, sat on the sofa, and started typing. Li Ruobing's company in Tongju City is indeed quite large, with a market value of over 10 billion, but it is still several times smaller than the specifications in the agreement. In 5 years, we have built a group company with a market value of over 5 billion. This is the test that the Li family gave to Li Ruobing. And they are not allowed to seek any help from their family and can only complete it independently. This condition is almost extremely harsh. In fact, the Li family had no intention of letting Li Ruobing complete it. To put it bluntly, they just wanted Li Ruobing to surrender. Just a softer approach. The Li family has been operating in Tongju for several generations. It is really very, very simple to curb the development of a company in a certain field. Take the previous incident in Qiantang Xinjian for example. In order to get that loan, Li Ruobing had to go to the bank countless times before she could reach an agreement, but her stepmother only needed one phone call or a tea party to get the bank's top executives to change their minds at the same time. Mingzhu Company almost collapsed because of this incident. Even Li Ruobing himself was forced to abdicate by his subordinates. Being curbed everywhere. This is the current situation of Mingzhu Company. According to the current situation, even if Li Kaixin were to run the company, it would be impossible for Mingzhu Company to have a market value of over 5 billion within 5 years. Su Rui stared at the computer screen with a cold light with an expressionless face. A personal profile is gradually built up. Name, Wang Shouchen. Identity, President of Blue Pool Real Estate, 37% of the shares. Hobby. Character. You can make friends through the method, whose connections are, and whose family members are. Name, Zhao Ruoxin. Identity, Vice President of Qinrui Bank. Hobby 4. Personality is. Su Rui paused and tapped his fingertips on the keyboard again. On May 1, 2007, due to a loan that failed to pass the review, Wang Fuyo of Derui Group received 870,000 yuan in cash in September of the same year. Ruifeng Real Estate received the money. Lines of shocking data slowly appeared on Su Rui's computer screen. Half an hour later, in the exclusive file of Su Rui's personal computer. More than a dozen character files, with extremely detailed content. Almost everyone's interests and hobbies, as well as private phone numbers and some secrets that cannot be seen by others, are recorded in the book. Including their life patterns and some significant things they did on a certain day. Some of them may not even remember it themselves. But Su Rui wrote them all down word for word. There was a stern flash in Su Rui's eyes. The people in this document were all those he wanted to contact, or even when over in Tongju City recently there were real estate bosses, famous journalists, senior officials and capable people from the public. They are distributed in various industries, with different interests, hobbies and identities. But the only thing in common is that they can bring help to Mingzhu Group. Whether it is official or private, whether it is economic or public opinion. The Li family is certainly powerful and deeply rooted in Tongju City, but once Su Rui contacts the people in the document, he will be qualified enough to compete with the Li family. Su Rui did not stay for too long. He squinted his eyes and began to make the next character file. But the difference from the previous one is that the previous file recorded his help, while this one records the business enemies he has to face. Su Rui is used to speaking with data analysis. Only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you win every battle. The sound of keyboard typing rang out again, and a new round of characters appeared in the document. Mrs. Qin Lan Li. Li Mingzi, the legitimate son of the Li family. It was not until about 1 o'clock in the morning that the two different types of character files were sorted out. Su Rui put away his computer and went back to his room to sleep. No words were spoken that night. A new day. Su Rui woke up on time and smiled as he looked at the time still ticking away on his phone. Although I know very well that time will not reset again, it is really great to have my life back. Get up and go downstairs. A police car with a blue and white logo was parked in front of Su Rui's house. Police car? Su Rui raised his eyebrows but said nothing. Mr. Su. The car door was pushed open, and a 34 or 35-year-old criminal policeman came over, threw away the cigarette in his hand, and waved his hand to clear the smoke in the air. Hello, I'm Peng Wuqiang from the Municipal Bureau Criminal Police Team. Peng Wuqiang is of medium build and very strong. He has square cheeks and rough, dark skin. He is not good looking, but he has a strong masculine aura. But his eyes seemed decadent, a little melancholy, even a little dull, and his voice was very deep. Hello. Su Rui raised his eyebrows. Have you been waiting for a long time? Why didn't you knock on the door? Su Rui noticed that there were many cigarette butts scattered around the police car, some of which were still smoking, while others had already gone cold. This means that Peng Wuqiang had been waiting outside the door at least 2 hours ago. There are many rules in the rich area. I have learned a lesson. Peng Wuqiang turned on the law enforcement recorder he carried with him, as if to mock himself. There is a case. I want to know the situation from you. The corners of Su Rui's mouth curled up silently. Peng Wuqiang. The deputy captain of the city criminal police team, he has a sharp and resolute style and a hot temper. He dares to slam the table and curse at his boss if he disagrees with something. He has strong personal abilities. He has been working for 14 years and has solved more than 20 major cases. During his tenure, the major case solving rate in Tongju City was almost 100%. Over the years, the gangsters and vicious criminals who fell into his hands could form a reinforced platoon. Even when Lin Jiata was still a young man, he was beaten up by him more than once. Logically speaking, with such achievements, he should have been promoted to a high position, not to mention a provincial department, but at least he should have been the boss of a municipal bureau. However, to this day, Peng Wuqiang is still a criminal policeman with a medium-ranking position, and he was even demoted from the original criminal police captain to a deputy position. This is very strange. However, although this seems almost unbelievable to outsiders, Su Rui knows it clearly. Just like what Peng Wuqiang said just now, his path to promotion was blocked because he offended someone. offended a rich, powerful person. 14 years of hard work were cut off by a single blow. From then on, Peng Wuqiang's personality began to become gloomy and cautious. His work attitude became very negative, even to the point of being cowardly and passive at work. The leaders of the municipal bureau were very dissatisfied with his performance, but in view of his previous merits, they retained his position as deputy captain of the criminal police team, but he was responsible for cases that were usually handled by interns or police officers. For example, fighting, cracking down on pornography and gambling, etc. Completely marginalized. Chapter 20, Peng Wuqiang's past. Do I still need to go to the municipal bureau with you? Su Rui asked with a smile. I have to get to the company before 8:30. Li Ruobing told him last night that she would handle the entry procedures for him. So from today on, Su Rui is a shareholder of Mingzhu Company and the president of Qiantang Xinjian. As a new official, he naturally has some matters to deal with, and he doesn't have much time to waste here. No, I just want to ask a few questions. Peng Wuqiang rubbed his eyes, and habitually took out a cigarette and lit it. Suddenly, he saw Su Rui's slightly frowned brows, and laughed dryly before extinguishing the cigarette. Mr. Su, on the 19th, which was last night, at 2017, where were you? Su Rui raised his eyebrows slightly. This was the time when Lin Jiata got into trouble. Maybe I just left the Haoqi building and went straight home. Haoqi building? Have you had contact with Lin Jiata before that? Peng Wuqiang asked again. Haoqi building is Lin Jiata's base camp. Of course I have contacted him. We discussed some things in his conference room. Su Rui did not intend to hide it. It took about an hour. What? I had a fight with his son and talked about compensation. Su Rui shrugged. Peng Wuqiang paused, licked his cracked lips, and said suddenly, Mr. Su, did you know that less than 10 minutes after you left, Lin Jiata was shot? He stared at Su Rui's eyes, trying to see some changes in his expression. Even the slightest change would be something he could capture. At this moment, Peng Wuqiang became like a falcon again. Oh, Su Rui said calmly, without even blinking, without any emotion, is he dead? When ordinary people hear this kind of news, more than 80% will be surprised, and may even scream out. 20% will change color and frown. Even those who are thoughtful will have subtle changes in expression, such as slightly raising their eyebrows, slightly dilating their noses, or shrinking their pupils. This is a subconscious reaction of the human body and cannot be controlled at all. Peng Wuqiang said with a serious expression, but I didn't see any of these reactions in you. There are only two explanations. One is that you already knew about this. The other is that your facial muscles are stiff and can't react normally. Do you think I have facial paralysis? Su Rui asked with a blink. Not likely. Peng Wuqiang shook his head, and then said again, so there is only the first possibility. You knew about this matter before. Lin Jiata was shot, and you are a big suspect. Oh, I'm a suspect. Can you convict me? Su Rui tilted his head again, and even the smile on his face did not disappear. His tone was still relaxed. Or are you going to take me back and detain me for 24 hours? The muscles on Peng Wuqiang's cheeks twitched, his fingers exerted slight force, and his knuckles turned a little white. Officer Peng, let's get straight to the point. Su Rui chuckled and pointed at the law enforcement recorder on Peng Wuqiang's shoulder. Turn that thing off. I want to talk to you about something useful. During the mission. Su Rui waved his hands impatiently, and his tone suddenly became stern. Officer Peng, are you really carrying out the mission of the municipal bureau? Peng Wuqiang was stunned, and then his face turned ugly. He said in a deep voice, of course I received an order from the municipal bureau to investigate the Lin Jiata shooting case. Have you ever seen a police officer on a mission where the captain is out doing his job and the assistant police officer is sitting in the car playing with his phone? Su Rui pointed expressionlessly at a young man wearing a baggy police uniform sitting on the passenger seat of the police car. This assistant police officer is a migrant worker you pulled over from the construction site, pretending to be a colleague who is on a mission with you, right? Peng Wuqiang's face turned pale in an instant. China's police system is very strict, and usually 2 or more people are involved in investigating a case together. This helps avoid emergencies and allows for mutual supervision. The young criminal policeman sitting on the passenger seat had messy hair, red eyes, and mucus in the corners of his eyes, but he was still playing PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds very enthusiastically. Under normal circumstances, this would have been nerfed long ago. Investigating the shooting of Lin Jiatao is your personal behavior. Su Rui took a step forward and directly pressed the switch of the law enforcement recorder. Am I right? Peng Wuqiang's Adam's apple moved up and down. He silently took out the wrinkled cigarette box again, pinched out a cigarette and put it in his mouth. The air was filled with smoke. Peng Wuqiang smiled bitterly. You can tell the authenticity of something just by relying on a police assistant. Su Rui shook his head slowly. Of course it's not just for this reason. The discordant auxiliary police is only one aspect, but more importantly, Lin Jiatao was shot last night and he didn't dare to call the police at all. Not only that, Lin Jiatao also tried his best to conceal the matter and secretly transferred him to a private hospital for treatment. Because both the gun and the man belonged to Lin Jiatao. Once it's on the news, no matter who the mastermind behind it is, Lin Jiatao will definitely be implicated. If someone with ulterior motives digs deeper, they might uncover some shameful things in Lin Jiatao's company. When Lin Jiatao was shot, only one leg was injured, but if the incident escalated, his injuries would be more than just flesh and blood. His influence and certain upper-class figures allow him to do some extraordinary, even lawless things in secret, but he must not reveal too much in public, as that would have an extremely bad impact on his company and family. In addition, Lin Jiatao came from a gangster background, so he never thought of solving the matter through the police. Su Rui knows Lin Jiatao too well. He will never swallow his anger after Lin Jiatao recovers. He will use his own means to avenge himself. Only in this way can I get rid of the hatred in my heart. When the two are connected, Peng Wuqiang's disguise is exposed. Let me guess, why do you, who are always negative about work, pay so much attention to Lin Jiatao's case? Su Rui circled around Peng Wuqiang, like a king cobra staring at its prey, and smiled silently. There are three possibilities. 1. You want to change your work attitude, want to return to the core position of the police force, and want to use this to attract the attention of the police station leaders. Su Rui held up a finger, but this possibility is very small, because this case is very complicated. If it is not handled properly, the effect will be counterproductive. Peng Wuqiang laughed, but it was a bitter self-deprecating laugh. He shook his head and said nothing, only taking a deep puff of the cheap cigarette in his hand. Second, Lin Jiatao had a private connection with you, and you accepted his bribes and did things for him. As soon as these words came out, Peng Wuqiang's expression froze, and then the veins on his forehead popped up, and his eyes were filled with anger. You are fucking insulting me by saying this. Su Rui was not angry. His eyes narrowed into slits and he smiled sinisterly. Then there is only one possibility left. Officer Peng, do you want to use this incident to bring down Lin Jiatao? Peng Wuqiang paused, his expression somewhat bitter. Because you offended the person who cut your career short, that person was Lin Jiatao. Su Rui's voice was loud and clear, and every word he said was like a heavy hammer, hitting Peng Wuqiang's heart. Bang! The crumpled cigarette box was thrown on the ground. Peng Wuqiang clenched his fists and his eyebrows twitched wildly. Su Rui smiled silently. He leaned close to Peng Wuqiang's ear and said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "Why did you just tell me straight away? Why did you make such a fuss? I can help you." Peng Wuqiang's pupils constricted. At this time, there were two documents on Su Rui's personal computer. In the file of people who need to befriend, the fifth person in the first row has three big characters, Peng Wuqiang, marked in bold font. Chapter 21, Cruel Reality. In a breakfast shop full of the smell of oil smoke, Su Rui pinched a fried dough stick and pushed a bowl of soy milk in front of Peng Wuqiang. Didn't you have breakfast? Have some. It was already past the peak breakfast time, and they were the only table of guests in the restaurant. Peng Wuqiang was not at all pretentious. He grabbed the bun from the plate and took 2 bites. He smiled and said, "I never thought that a rich man like you would eat fried dough sticks and drink soy milk in a breakfast shop like this. What should rich people eat for breakfast? Braised Siberian tiger or stir-fried African elephant?" Su Rui joked casually. Captain Peng's perception of rich people seems to be a bit biased. Har har. Peng Wuqiang was also happy. The originally somewhat solemn atmosphere suddenly became relaxed after Su Rui's few words. "Do you hate Lin Jiatao?" Su Rui wiped the grease off his hands and went straight to the point. He didn't have much time left and needed to arrive at the company before 8:30. Before that, he had to reach an agreement with Peng Wuqiang in the simplest way. "It may be inappropriate for me to say this, but since you asked, I will talk to you about it." When this matter was mentioned, Peng Wuqiang finished the bun in his hand in a few bites and subconsciously wanted to take out a cigarette, but then he remembered that he had just thrown the cigarette box at the door of Su Rui's house. Su Rui smiled and took out an unopened box of Zhonghua cigarettes from his pocket and handed it over. You smoke too? Peng Wuqiang was stunned for a moment, because he did not smell the tobacco smell that only comes from frequent smoking on Su Rui, and there was no sign of yellowing between his fingers from the tobacco oil. With the keen insight of an old criminal policeman, he judged that Su Rui probably did not smoke. I don't smoke, but I always carry this kind of stuff with me. Su Rui smiled. We often encounter this kind of situation in life. Old smokers must be familiar with this scene, when a person is craving for a cigarette but has no cigarette in hand. At this time, when you, a non-smoker, take out a cigarette from your pocket and hand it to him, he will think that you are a very thoughtful and considerate person. Although this behavior will not have much influence at the time, this small action can subtly influence the impression you leave on others. Many decisive events are achieved bit by bit through such small tricks. This is one of the many ways to communicate. Thank you. After hesitating for a moment, Peng Wuqiang stretched out his hand, tore open the package and lit a cigarette. He took a long breath and his eyes became firm. I do hate Lin Jiatao, but I don't hate him because he cut off my path to promotion. What I hate is that it's unfair. Su Rui nodded calmly. He knew what Peng Wuqiang had gone through. For an old detective who has solved countless cases and worked diligently for more than 10 years, this result is indeed hard to accept. Who is Lin Jiatao? If you ask anyone randomly on the streets of Tongju, 8 out of 10 will answer that he is a gangster. He uses violence to make money, gang fights, and is lawless. In the past few years since he made his fortune, how many deaths and missing people has he caused? At least more than 20 times. Peng Wuqiang lowered his voice, but one could still hear the undisguised anger in his tone. If it were this kind of scum, he would have been shot 100 times in the 1980s. But the fact is, not only was he not locked up, he also put on a suit, drove a luxury car, lived in a mansion, and transformed himself into an outstanding entrepreneur. Su Rui said immediately following Peng Wuqiang's words. Yes. Peng Wuqiang took a deep puff of smoke, his eyes reddened. Even for a man like him, his company can become a key support target of the upper echelons, and I, a criminal policeman who has worked diligently for more than 10 years, was found to have offended him before and was directly dismissed from my position as captain. Tell me, is this fair? Peng Wuqiang kept these words in his heart for several years. Since he was stripped of his position as captain, his life has undergone tremendous changes. He made frequent mistakes at work, his personality became bad, and he even quarreled with his wife many times because of this matter, which eventually led to a divorce. Officer Peng, let me ask you a question. Su Rui glanced at the time and asked, how old are you this year? 37. You are 37, almost 40 years old, which means you are no longer a babbling primary school student. So? Su Rui suddenly paused and smiled strangely. Why do you still believe that there is so-called fairness in this world? This one sentence stumped Peng Wuqiang. He was silent, his throat moving up and down. Fair and just. He once believed that there was fairness in this world, but reality gave him a hard slap in the face and told him, wake up, the world is not what you think. Okay, then I'll ask you another question. Seeing Peng Wuqiang remain silent, Su Rui continued to ask, how much force do you think Lin Jiatao would have to use to punish you? I don't know. Peng Wuqiang's eyes were red and he looked very tired. Just make a phone call, Su Rui stretched out a finger and said expressionlessly. Impossible. Peng Wuqiang shook his head stubbornly. I am the captain with real power. I have handled countless major cases. Even if Lin Jiatao wants to touch me, it won't be that easy. For example, in the eyes of the upper echelons, who do you think is more important to Tongju City, you or Lin Jiatao? Su Rui's words became more and more blunt. Lin Jiatao's net worth exceeds 10 billion, and the tax he pays every year is an astronomical figure, not to mention his company's investment and development in Tongju City. It is no exaggeration to say that with Lin Jiatao around, Tongju City can generate at least 2 billion in fiscal revenue every year. Su Rui observed the changes in Peng Wuqiang's expression. Do you know what this means? In the eyes of the upper echelons, with Lin Jiatao in office, the province's annual fiscal task targets can be completed very easily. Whoever is in office has his political achievements. If the upper echelons are preparing to develop a barren area but lack a lot of funds, and Lin Jiatao announces that he is willing to respond to the call for investment, and the only additional condition is that you step down. Do you think the upper echelons will protect you or choose Lin Jiatao? Guaxia has no shortage of Peng Goqiangs who can catch thieves and solve cases, but there is only one capitalist, Lin Jiatao, who actively cooperates with the upper echelons, invests when asked to invest, cooperates when asked to cooperate, and donates a large amount of money to the government poverty alleviation fund every year. Peng Guoqiang's hands were trembling slightly. I know you have some dirty information about Lin Jiatao. I also know you have been secretly investigating him for a long time and are ready to wrap it up. Su Rui said, but believe me, don't submit that information to your superiors for now. It will definitely lead to no results. Su Rui knew very well what would happen if Peng Guoqiang handed the materials in his hands over to his superiors. The higher-ups will protect Lin Jiatao. In order to prevent this incident from escalating, they will use all their strength to minimize its impact, and may even deal with Peng Guoqiang. But this does not mean that there is any secret connection between the upper echelons and Lin Jiatao, or that there is any money and power relationship between the two parties. Rather, it means that compared with Peng Guoqiang, Lin Jiatao's influence on Tongju City is more important. One should not meddle in matters that are not within one's jurisdiction. In the eyes of the upper echelons, the long-term development of Tongju City is far more important than solving a few cases. Chapter 22 Second Board Meeting. Peng Guoqiang's face changed and his chest heaved violently, but he finally fell silent. He is not a fool without intelligence. After experiencing some changes, he gradually saw many facts clearly. Su Rui was right. Lin Jiatao could not fail now. To date, Lin's business has been deeply rooted in Tongju City. Give me some time, and I will establish a group in Tongju City that can replace Lin's. Su Rui patted Peng Guoqiang on the shoulder and said meaningfully, when the time comes, when I hand over the materials in your hand, their weight will be completely different. Peng Guoqiang thought about it and lowered his head to take another puff of his cigarette. Why help me? Peng Guoqiang had doubts because he and Su Rui had no social interaction, let alone any friendship. Because you are a person with conscience and faith. Su Rui rubbed his fingers expressionlessly. People like you should go further, and should not end so early. Peng Guoqiang looked up at Su Rui. Su Rui kept smiling. Besides, I also need your help. But don't worry, I won't let you do anything out of line or against professional ethics. Su Rui knew Peng Guoqiang's character very well. He was stubborn, tenacious, and so devoted to his own conscience that he was somewhat inhuman. In his career, he had never opened a back door for anyone, even at the cost of offending his superiors. It is impossible to bribe such a person to do something insidious and unethical. And Su Rui had never thought about it this way. The first thing you need to do now is to return to the core position. Su Rui began to give advice to Peng Guoqiang. I have some information on major unsolved cases in Tongju City that have been accumulated for more than 10 years. Maybe I can help you. 8:20. Su Rui arrived downstairs of Mingzhu building on time and took a look at the message on his mobile phone. See you in the conference room at 8:30. Su Rui smiled and went straight to the second floor. In the conference room, Li Ruobing sat at the first seat with a document in front of him, looking very calm and composed. There were 2 rows of seats, 7 of which were empty. Hu Guangyi stood by the window, talking quietly on the phone and pacing back and forth subconsciously, obviously feeling a little irritated. Hello, is this Lao Li? You are his nanny. What about him? Is he sick? It's serious. He's in the hospital. Oh, he can't come to the company today, right? Okay, I understand. Su Rui didn't disturb him. Instead, he walked to the empty seat closest to Li Ruobing and sat down, naturally raised his legs and crossed his legs, leaning his body to support his chin, and watched Hu Guangyi talking on the phone with interest. Hey, Mr. Chen, what's going on? Your mother's birthday is in July, isn't it? What? You celebrated it in advance. Is it possible to celebrate it in advance? Hello. After making 5 or 6 calls in a row, Hu Guangyi's face turned ashen. Everyone on the other end of the phone was making excuses or evading the issue. Even if his brain was slow, he realized something was wrong. Glancing at the expressionless Li Ruobing and smiling Su Rui in front of the conference table, Hu Guangyi had a feeling that today's events might not be that simple, and that he was being isolated and targeted. But he couldn't understand why his teammates became so scared after just one night and didn't even dare to show their faces. Hu Guangyi licked his lips, feeling a little nervous. It's time. Li Ruobing tapped the table with his fingertips, and then signaled the secretary to close the door of the conference room. Let's get started. Hu Guangyi walked to the conference table with a gloomy face, glanced at Su Rui, hesitated for a moment, and then walked to the empty seat farthest from him and sat down. He was indeed a little afraid of Su Rui. Today's meeting is about several personnel changes and the opening of the new Qiantang store. Li Ruobing spoke first and took out a letter of appointment from a folder. Let me read it out. From now on, all 7 shareholders of Mingzhu Company, including Li Xiqing, Chen Lin, and Wang Guofeng, will be relieved of their posts. Their jobs will be taken over by Bai Tingxian and Wang Weiying. Hu Guangyi's heart skipped a beat. Li Ruobing's counterattack came so quickly and ruthlessly, leaving no room for maneuver. But why does she dare to do this? She only holds 31% of the shares, yet she is using such a decisive battle. Isn't she afraid of backlash? Hu Guangyi looked very unhappy. Hu Guangyi is removed from his positions as Human Resources Manager and Logistics Manager, but retains the title of Honorary Vice President. Li Ruobing paused deliberately. Wait. Hu Guangyi gritted his teeth and stared at Li Ruobing. I don't agree with this arrangement. Why do you want to take away all my positions? This is a resolution of the Board of Directors. Your consent is not required. Li Ruobing closed the document. Board of Directors. I didn't see any votes, nor any resolutions. Hu Guangyi sneered. You dismissed the shareholders from their positions in the company without a vote. Mr. Li, aren't you too overbearing? If you don't know, you would think you hold absolute control. Hu Guangyi's words were very clever. He did not directly confront Li Ruobing, but instead used equity as an excuse. Because several other shareholders did not attend the meeting, even if a temporary vote is taken now, it will be invalid. Idiot. Old Bai cursed with a simple and straightforward expression. Oh, you mean absolute controlling stake? Su Rui smiled and pulled out a few documents from the archives and placed them in front of Hu Guangyi. If you can read, take a look. Hu Guangyi opened it with doubt. In an instant, his face turned extremely pale. How is this possible? They actually transferred all their shares to you. Hu Guangyi was shocked, he couldn't believe his eyes. The document showed in black and white that his teammates, who were originally in the same camp with him, had sold all their shares to Li Ruobing. If you don't believe it, you can go to the identification department to test its authenticity. Su Rui said. Hu Guangyi remained silent. These equity transfer documents completely stunned him. 20%, plus the 31% that Li Ruobing already had. 51%, this is the limit of absolute controlling rights. After a long silence, Hu Guangyi spoke again, looking at Su Rui, his voice very aggrieved. You must have used dirty tricks. Just wait, I will find out the truth about this matter. Please do as you please. Su Rui shrugged indifferently, but now you are no longer a senior executive of Mingzhu. We still have a meeting to continue. Please get out if you are not related to me. Hu Guangyi suddenly felt a surge of evil energy. Even if I'm not a senior executive at Mingzhu, I'm still a shareholder. You're the outsider. What qualifications do you have to ask me to leave? Li Ruobing glanced at him expressionlessly and spoke again. Next, I will announce an appointment. The Qiantang new store is about to open. After the resolution of the Board of Directors, the candidate for General Manager is Su Rui. After these words were spoken, the expression on Hu Guangyi's face became even more interesting. These pieces of news were like sledgehammers that hit his heart hard one after another, leaving him no time to react. Now, do I have the right to ask you to get out? Su Rui smiled calmly. Veins bulged on Hu Guangyi's forehead and his eyebrows were twitching. After a long time, he stood up, breathing heavily, and walked straight to the door. Like a defeated wild dog. Hey! Old Hu, where is your awesome spirit yesterday when you were in charge of everything and making decisions? Where has it gone? Old Bai said in a loud voice and added a timely blow. Hu Guangyi suddenly stopped, sneered twice, and pretended to be calm and said, Old Bai, things have changed, you. Get out of here right now. Old Bai interrupted directly. Chapter 23 Invitation Letter. President Li Ruobing's office. Su Rui held a magnetic card in his hand, as well as an employment file and an ID card. The company has been cleared out. You should prepare for the opening of the new store next. Li Ruobing was flipping through folders at his desk. There are many things waiting for you to deal with. No hurry. Su Rui smiled and said, "Do you really think your company is clean?" "What do you mean?" Li Ruobing looked up and asked. "Hu Guangyi is Qin Lan's man, and he is not the only one in your company who is Qin Lan's man," Su Rui said with a raised eyebrow. Qin Lan, Li Ruobing's stepmother. Mrs. Li, who has always regarded Li Ruobing as an imaginary enemy. Her original plan was to use Hu Guangyi to seize power and force you out of your position. You lost control of the company, so the agreement was considered a failure. In addition, Mingzhu Company was also taken over by her, which was a good thing that killed two birds with one stone. But now that her obvious pawn has been kicked out of the game, I believe her next move will be implemented soon. Su Rui played with the identity card in his hand. Through his understanding of Qin Lan, he knew that she was a woman who would not give up until she achieved her goal. "Let her come, I'll take it all," Li Ruobing said. "Although I have no doubts about your business skills and talents, your foundation and available resources are still not as good as hers." Su Rui said, "Because you are a younger generation, your father is still in charge of the Li family. If you and Qin Lan do the same thing at the same time, do you think others will give you face or give Qin Lan face?" Su Rui said that he had always been able to see the essence of things. The agreement regarding the Li family was itself an unequal gamble. "You mean, I should get to know some people from higher classes and use them as my own resources?" Li Ruobing was very smart and understood what he meant immediately. Su Rui smiled. "There are 2 tickets for the Wenfeng Gala in your drawer. The content is art appreciation. The time is tonight. Let's go together." Su Rui tapped the table lightly with his fingertips. "This is a good opportunity." Li Ruobing's body stiffened for a moment, then he took out 2 exquisite invitations from the drawer. "Now, I kind of believe that you are a reborn person. I just received these 2 invitations the evening before yesterday." "That's right, and you didn't even want to participate." Su Rui added again. Li Ruobing narrowed her eyes. She had indeed not thought about attending this literary and artistic summit before. The reason was simple: she was not interested in these things. "I don't know much about the field of art." Li Ruobing hesitated for a moment and pursed her lips helplessly. She has always been obsessed with business and running the company. "Okay, I admit that this is my shortcoming." As she pursed her lips, a bunch of long, straight black hair fell down, and Li Ruobing's posture was like that of a shy little girl. Su Rui stared at Li Ruobing's face with interest. Because this posture is so rare, the always strong Li Ruobing rarely shows this kind of helpless or surrendering expression. "The content is not important." Su Rui smiled. "What's important is that art is also a means of communication. This is a common nature of people. When material and living conditions improve, they like to develop in the direction of art and spiritual satisfaction. There may not be many people who really understand art appreciation who come to the Wenfeng party, but there are definitely many rich and powerful people. These big bosses or senior executives also want to get to know more people in this way. This is why there are many nouveau riches who cannot read or write, but always like to set up a study, practice calligraphy, or go to concerts. Although he may not even understand Dori Mifa Solar Shi, he still pretends to be fascinated. Because your class has reached that level. You are worth billions, but when you talk to other entrepreneurs, you still talk a lot of dirty jokes. Over time, will others still be willing to pay attention to you? They will think that you are not classy and dog meat is not presentable. Over time, they will consciously stay away from you. Although this kind of behavior may seem pretentious, this is the trend. If you can't fit in, you will be excluded. Li Ruobing came from a wealthy family, so she was naturally very clear about the ins and outs of the matter. So after Su Rui spoke, she did not insist any further. "Let's go." Su Rui grabbed the car keys on the table. "What?" Li Ruobing frowned. "To attend a party, you naturally need a dress that fits you. You don't want to wear this, do you?" Li Ruobing owns more than one car, and in the congested traffic conditions in the center of Tongju, the comfort of a Pagani is obviously not as good as that of a commercial vehicle. A silver-gray Rolls-Royce was parked in front of a high-end dress shop. Su Rui glanced at the sign at the door and raised his eyebrows. "What's wrong?" Li Ruobing noticed that Su Rui was acting strangely. "Nothing." Su Rui smiled and walked in with Li Ruobing. This custom dress shop is very famous throughout Tongju City. It specializes in customizing a variety of high-end dresses for the upper class. The materials and workmanship are very delicate, and the prices are also extremely expensive. And most importantly, this store has certain financial requirements for the customer. Those with assets below 50 million will not be accepted. This hunger marketing method was extremely effective and the business was unexpectedly booming. But Li Ruobing was naturally not among those who were refused reception. Not to mention how huge the Li family's assets were, even her own company had assets of over 10 billion, and everyone in the entire Tongju city knew about it. Welcome, Ms. Li. How can I help you? The clerks who can work in this kind of store have all been trained and are very familiar with the wealthy families in Tongju city. When they saw Li Ruobing coming, the clerk on duty bowed slightly and was very polite and respectful. Do you have any ready-made dresses? Pick out a few suitable ones for this gentleman and me to try on. Li Ruobing said calmly. She was not the kind of person who would act arrogantly when she saw a service staff with a lower status than her. I want the latest styles. The clerk nodded repeatedly and turned his gaze to Su Rui standing beside him, feeling a little surprised. Li Ruobing was very famous in Tongju. She was cold and arrogant. No one had ever heard of a man who could walk with her or even choose a dress with her. Could it be that this handsome man with a gentle smile is Li Ruobing's boyfriend? Please wait a moment. The clerk knew that this was not the time for him to gossip, so he led the two to the VIP lounge and left in a hurry. Soon, a set of women's dresses were put out. Ms. Li, the men's suits will be here in a moment. Please take a look at these first. The clerk did not dare to neglect her. Go try it first. Su Rui smiled and waved his hand. Li Ruobing didn't say anything, just nodded and walked towards the fitting room. The clerk followed Li Ruobing happily, holding a few dresses. The fire of gossip in my heart is burning fiercely. Everyone knows how strong Li Ruobing is, but that man spoke to her in an almost commanding tone. The most important thing is that Li Ruobing actually agreed. Who is this man? Su Rui crossed his legs, looked around the display cases, and waited bored. Suddenly, there was a sound of leather shoes coming from above the stairwell. The footsteps stopped. A young man in an elegant suit stood there. Although he was handsome, his face was sickly pale, and he could not conceal his arrogance. Looking at Su Rui in the rest area, there was some confusion, puzzlement, and deliberate arrogance in his eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, as if he was surprised, and said, Am I seeing right? You are Su Rui. How did you get into this dress shop? Chapter 24, The Rich Woman and the Gigolo. Sarcastic. There is also a hint of condescending scrutiny and arrogance. Su Rui knew who he was the moment he saw him. Gao La, formerly known as Gao Jianjun, is 25 years old this year and is from Lujigu, Lianqitan, Tongju City. His family is not a wealthy one, on the contrary, it is an ordinary family. The reason why he is here is because he has a rich female friend. To put it simply, it means hooking up with a rich woman. The owner of this dress shop is Marshume. Relying on his strong physique, handsome appearance, and some indescribable bed skills, he served Marshume to the point of being completely captivated. Ever since he got close to Marshume, he has completely escaped from the doghouse he was born into, flew onto the tree, and transformed himself into a gilded, successful person. And more importantly, he knew Su Rui, not only knew him, but was very familiar with him. It was just before Su Rui turned 18. They attended the same high school. We are classmates. But relations between the two sides have always been bad. It originated from a conflict. In the past, Su Rui was also a celebrity in school during his high school days. However, in this life, since graduating from university, he has become unknown and indistinguishable from the crowd. Compared with Giaola, who is doing very well, he naturally appears to be very down and out. And now that they met in this luxurious dress shop, Giaola was naturally very proud. Hey Giaola, long time no see. Su Rui nodded. He was too lazy to bother with such people. The character he had tempered over billions of lifetimes made it difficult for him to be interested in such an opponent. He knew that Giaola must have come here to cause trouble. This is something that is very easy to figure out. When you meet that classmate who has always been superior to you in your school days, and who is now doing worse than you will naturally develop a sense of superiority in your heart, and want to step on him or her to get rid of the depression that you felt during your student days because you were suppressed for many years. Especially people like Gallop, who seem generous but are actually extremely narrow-minded. Old classmate. We are destined to meet, Gallop said with a smile on his face. He walked over and pretended to be very familiar with him and asked jokingly, "How come Mr. Su is doing well now? He is qualified to enter a custom dress shop. It seems that he doesn't need to rely on subsidies to make a living now." Surui rubbed his nose expressionlessly. The conflict between him and Gallop originated from a certain scholarship. "Well, it's okay." Surui smiled brightly. "You're still pretending, aren't you?" Gallop glanced at the Rolls-Royce key on the table, and his tone suddenly became exaggerated. "Oh, not bad. You're driving a Rolls-Royce. You came here with the boss, right?" Gallop's voice was very loud, deliberately trying to attract attention so that the store clerks and other customers could hear it. "Want to embarrass Surui? You're right, I'm a driver now." Surui didn't argue with him too much. It was an unnecessary waste to waste words with an idiot. "You said that things in this world are really unpredictable. The ancients were right when they said that one should look at a man with new eyes after 3 days of absence. You said that you were very famous in school, and now you have become a driver." Gallop looked quite excited, and his tone seemed to express pity for Surui's experience. "This person's fate, who knows when it will change? Looking at my appearance back then, who would have thought that I now have several villas, several sports cars, and 3 stores under my name?" Gallop laughed wantonly and patted Surui on the shoulder. "Old classmate, if you have any difficulties, just tell me. In Tongju City, my face is still worth something. By the way, are you happy working for your former boss? Why don't you come and drive for me full time? The salary is 30,000 yuan per month, and you can ask for any salary you want. I am still very satisfied with my current life." Surui naturally knew what Gallop meant, and said perfunctorily, "What full-time driver, what kind of treatment, is mentioned casually just to show off in disguised form and humiliate yourself at the same time?" But now he really doesn't want to argue with someone like Gallop. The two sides are not on the same level. How could a kept gigolo have the qualifications to be taken seriously by Surui? If a dog barks at a lion, will the lion roar back at it? At most, he would just get annoyed and give him a slap or even kill him. But in Gallop's eyes, this low keenness became a manifestation of Surui's cowardice and lack of confidence. He became more and more convinced that Surui was a driver. Surui, you know what? You're quite good at pretending." Gallop licked his lips, crossed his legs casually, and inadvertently revealed the pure gold Rolex on his wrist. He pointed his finger at Surui's chest in midair. "You said you've become a wrist-selling driver, why are you still pretending to be a tough guy who won't bow down for a few dollars?" The real purpose is revealed. Gallop finally got on the right track. He began to vent openly the fear and dissatisfaction that had been accumulating in his heart towards Surui for many years. Surui smiled faintly. Step. The sound of high heels was heard on the stairs, and a middle-aged woman in her 40s, wearing a shawl, walked down with a frown on her face. She had a huge diamond ring on her hand, long wavy hair and heavy makeup. Although he is fat, his aura is very strong. Compared with Li Ruobing, he is less sharp and fierce, but more stable. As soon as Gallop saw the woman, he trotted over like a dog, bowing and nodding. The person who came was none other than the owner of this dress shop, Marshome. "Honey, why did you come down? Didn't you say that I will be the one to manage the store from now on? You just need to enjoy yourself at ease." Letian smiled and looked servile, just like the old eunuch beside the Empress Dowager in the Qing Palace dramas. The clerk next to him rolled his eyes in disdain and moved away from him calmly. "You have to call me chairman in the store." Marshome looked slightly dissatisfied. She glanced at the table on Surui's body and asked, "Why didn't you serve coffee or tea to the guests? Who manages the rest area? Ask the person in charge to come and see me." Gallop quickly explained, "Chairman, I am responsible for the rest area. This guy is not a guest at all, he is just a driver who came with the customer. I don't think it is necessary. What do you think?" Marshome didn't give Gallop any face at all and punched him in the chest. "Anyone who comes into the store is our customer, no matter who they are, and they should receive the same treatment. Go, bring the tea and snacks over." Chapter 25, The Secret of Gallop. Surui raised his eyebrows. He had a good impression of Marshome. As a woman, she was able to start from scratch and increase her wealth to over 10 billion by running a custom-made dress shop. Ma Xiaomei's business philosophy and methods were really very strong. In terms of service awareness alone, she is countless times better than Gaola, who is a useless person. After being scolded by Ma Xiaomei, Gaola suddenly felt a little gloomy. He held his breath and waved to the waiter beside him. "Xiao Wang, go get some tea and snacks." "I told you to go." Ma Xiaomei interrupted Gaola directly. Gaola's face turned blue and red, and he walked out holding his breath. A moment later, when Gaola placed the snack plate in front of Su Rui, his face had turned pale. "It's not easy for you either." Su Rui crossed his legs, picked up a piece of cake and threw it into his mouth. "The taste is pretty good." Gaola's eyebrows twitched wildly, and after a long time, he slowly let out a sigh of relief. "No matter how difficult it is, it's better than being a driver. I drive 3 sports cars every day. Can you do it?" Su Rui looked at the middle-aged woman who was about 1.5 meters tall and weighed about 160 kilograms from a distance, and laughed dumbly. "I really can't do it." "If you want to, someone has to think highly of you." Gaola seemed to have found a way to vent his anger. Swipe. The curtain of the fitting room was drawn, revealing Li Ruobing in a bohemian-style fiery red dress. She was dazzling, with layers of hollow patterns on the hem. Gorgeous and delicate tassels fluttered around her white ankles, making her look dignified and beautiful. The long hem of her skirt outlined her figure in an extremely seductive way. Her long black hair was casually draped over her shoulders, her skin was fair and flawless, and her thin lips were as delicate as rose petals. Combined with her original cold temperament, she looks like a lonely red lotus rooted on the top of a snowy mountain. Amazingly beautiful. When she appeared in the lobby, all eyes were drawn to her. Su Rui clearly heard the sound of Gaola swallowing his saliva. He frowned. If Gaola's words to Su Rui were disrespectful, he could have ignored it, but when it came to Li Ruobing, he would not allow anyone to interfere. "Ms. Li, why are you here?" Ma Xiaomei was surprised to see Li Ruobing, and she smiled and walked over. Li Ruobing also nodded modestly. She held a respectful attitude towards this strong female senior. In Tongju City, Li Ruobing and Ma Xiaomei had little social interaction, but they knew each other. "I'm going to a party and I'm here to buy 2 sets of clothes," Li Ruobing said with a smile. "Xiao Wang, go and get the latest customized sets from the display cabinet upstairs for Miss Li." Ma Xiaomei ordered her clerk decisively. "No need." Li Ruobing stretched out her hand to stop him. Ma Xiaomei was very enthusiastic and smiled back. "I have already chosen. Mr. Liu, please help me pick 2 sets for men." "Men?" Ma Xiaomei was stunned for a moment, then quickly smiled and said, "Miss Li, you prepared this for your boyfriend, right? Do you remember his size?" Li Ruobing hasn't spoken yet. Gaola straightened his collar and sleeves, pretending to be polite and gentle, and walked over, clearing his throat. "Hello, Miss Li, if your boyfriend is not here, I can show you our latest men's clothing styles. My height and muscle distribution are very standard. I think my figure is better than your boyfriend's. I can show you every angle of the dress to the maximum extent." Ma Xiaomei glanced at him with a gloomy look, but she did not lose her temper in front of Li Ruobing. Gaola has some flowers. She knew all this because she was well aware that her appearance was not enough to attract Gaola in the long run, so she became much more relaxed. As long as Gaola didn't do anything out of line, she could accept it. "No need, he came with me." Li Ruobing was naturally very clear about Gaola's thoughts, but in her eyes, this kind of embroidered pillow was not even as good as a piece of dog shit. For the sake of Ma Xiaomei's face, she did not let Gaola get out directly. If this happened outside, Li Ruobing would have slapped Gaola, a talkative pretender with a rotten heart. Su Rui stood up and walked over. Then, in front of everyone's gaze, she casually tucked a bunch of Li Ruobing's hair that fell on her cheek behind her ear. This is a very intimate gesture. And Li Ruobing did not refuse, in fact, he was used to it. Gaola, who witnessed all this, took a deep breath and his eyes widened like bells, filled with disbelief and shock. He knew Li Ruobing's identity. She is the descendant of the most powerful family in Tongju City, and is a recognized iceberg beauty who is difficult to approach. But why would she do such intimate things with Su Rui? Gaola felt his head go dizzy. Could it be that Li Ruobing is actually Su Rui's girlfriend? Ma Xiumei was very discerning and immediately reached out to shake hands with Su Rui. This must be Miss Li's boyfriend, he is so handsome, Miss Li has really good taste. In one sentence, he praised two people. Mr. Ma, nice to meet you. Su Rui responded with a smile. Hurry up and get the men's suit. Ma Xiumei turned her head and urged. Oh. Gaola was stunned for a moment, agreed repeatedly, and went to the display cabinet on the second floor to pick up the goods in a daze. About 5 minutes later, Gaola ran down carrying several brand new dresses, followed Su Rui and asked him to try them on one by one. This one is very nice. Li Ruobing stood aside and helped Su Rui turn up his collar with a very ambiguous gesture. Gaola stood far away at the counter, staring at Su Rui with jealous eyes that almost burst into flames, cursing quietly, "What a fucking bad luck. This Li Ruobing looks quite decent, but she must be a slut. I don't know how many people she has slept with. Su Rui must also be a rag picker." His voice was so small that it was almost inaudible. But unfortunately, Su Rui's nerves were extremely sharp, and every word of these words went into his ears without a single one missing. He snapped his fingers and a smile appeared on his face. He didn't know why there were always people who liked to seek trouble and commit suicide. Everyone has secrets. Gaola is no exception. But Su Rui knows everything in the world. He admitted that Gaola's words just now made him very unhappy. "Hey, Lao Gao, come here." Su Rui hooked his finger at Gaola, and deliberately made his voice so that everyone could hear it, including Ma Xiumei. Gaola walked over in a daze. Su Rui took out 1,000 yuan in cash from his pocket, stuffed it into Gaola's hand, and winked at him. This time, not only Gaola was confused, but also Li Ruobing and Ma Xiumei were confused. "What are you doing?" "Tip?" Gaola asked confusedly. Har. Su Rui patted Gaola on the shoulder and said in a friendly manner, "We are old classmates. I was not present when your son was 1 month old. This money can be regarded as a red envelope for the child." Quiet. Ma Xiumei's face suddenly darkened, and she stared at Gaola with her eyes like knives, and asked, "Son, you have a son? Are you married?" "What the hell are you talking about? What son? I've never been married." Gaola jumped up like a cat whose tail was stepped on, and threw all the money in his hand out. "Su Rui, what are you talking about?" "Oh, that's not right. I remember it clearly. Your son was born on the second floor of Minxing Hospital on July 16th. I wanted to visit him, but I was too busy and forgot about it." Su Rui smiled very strangely. "By the way, after your divorce, aren't you dating the resident singer at the Jinbihuihuang bar? You are getting married soon, right? I heard that she is pregnant too. You bought her several houses in the city center. Buddy, you are doing well now." Chapter 26, Black Material. "Fuck you. Su Rui, you never tell the truth. Get out. Get out now." Gaola's face flushed like a shrew. "Wait." Ma Xiumei's face was as gloomy as water, as if it would drip down in the next second. She stared at Gaola with heavy breathing and said word by word, "Don't say anything first, listen to what Mr. Su has to say." "Honey, don't listen to him. I have a conflict with him. He is deliberately slandering me." Gaola explained desperately. "If you don't have any black material, his smear campaign will never come true." "Shut up, stand aside and listen." Ma Xiumei had a blank expression on her face. If what Su Rui said was true, then this would be a lifelong shame for Ma Xiumei. She could accept that Gaola had been married once and had a son, because she was clear about her own situation and had nothing but money, so she allowed Gaola to have an ignominious past. But she would never allow Gaola to use her own money to support another woman and her illegitimate child. Su Rui seemed to have suddenly realized something, and smiled strangely, and asked cautiously, "Did I accidentally say something wrong? How dare you frame me? Fuck you, I'm going to sue you for defamation." Gaola's hands were shaking, and he even wanted to swing the mop in the corner and hit Su Rui. He has been with Ma Xiumei for a year and has a considerable fortune and shops. He is no longer the silly boy who came out of a poor mountain village. But he knew very well who had given him everything he had now. The villa, the sports car, and the shop assistant's respectful address of Mr. Gao all came from Ma Xiumei's gifts. She could give Gallop all these things at will, or turn him back to his original form in the blink of an eye. The most important thing is that everything Tsurui said is true. He was extremely panicked, so he could only cover it up with anger. He didn't know how Tsurui knew all this. He had clearly done everything perfectly, and he and Tsurui had no contact since graduation. Even if Tsurui wanted to investigate himself, he had no reason at all. Gallop racked his brains but couldn't figure it out. But the current situation did not give him time to continue thinking. My dear, listen to me, he is slandering me. My sincerity towards you is evident to all, please believe me. Gallop was trembling all over, grabbing Marshume's hands. He is my high school classmate, he is just jealous. He is jealous of my current life and wants to make up some dirt to break us up. Please tell him to get out. Please tell him to get out. At the end of his speech, Gallop almost broke his voice. What are you afraid of? Marshume pointed at Gallop's chest with a blank expression and said, don't worry, if he is really lying and slandering you, I don't care who he is, I will get back at you, but if what he said is true, this will be interesting. Marshume's tone was filled with stern anger, which she suppressed with great effort. As a billionaire and a successful businesswoman, she is a well-known figure even in the entire Tongju city. She is very face-conscious. Moreover, her relationship with Gallop was no secret in the first place. In Tongju City, many people knew that she was in a relationship with a man who was 2 years younger than her. For this reason, many people secretly said that she was an old cow eating young grass and acting shamelessly. But she turned a deaf ear to it. In addition to her extremely strong heart, there is another reason, which is that she really likes Gallop. Although Gallop didn't have much ability, he was young and handsome, and he cared for her in every possible way, and was even a little romantic from time to time. Marshume was really moved. She felt that Gallop was completely different from those short-term gigolos she had spent money to support in the past. Otherwise, she wouldn't have spent so much money selling her house and car for him, and let him be the person in charge of the store under her name. She even wanted to marry him and officially start a family. But all of this is based on the premise that Gallop is absolutely loyal to Marshume. Mr. Su, please continue. Marshume smiled, but her face was a little grim. I also want to hear how many secrets my boyfriend is hiding from me. Gallop was trembling all over. He looked at Tsurui with pleading eyes, and his knees felt slightly weak. If it wasn't in front of everyone, he even wanted to kneel down to Tsurui and beg Tsurui to stop talking. He is really scared. He was afraid that if Tsurui spoke again, he would really destroy everything he had, and he might even suffer even more severe torture. He knew Marshume's character and methods. For a woman like this to be cuckolded by himself, the consequences would definitely be unbearable for him. I'm sorry, I really didn't expect that you and Gallop. Tsurui looked at Marshume in front of him meaningfully, pretending to spread his hands innocently. If my slip of the tongue has caused a bad impact on the relationship between you and Gallop, I am really sorry. Li Ruobing looked at Tsurui with a strange expression. Slip of the tongue? Deeply regretful. I don't believe you. Ever since Tsurui appeared in front of her, he has not said anything beyond his control. As soon as Li Ruobing saw Tsurui's expression, she knew that this guy named Gallop was going to be in big trouble today. Although she didn't like to get involved in other people's family affairs, Tsurui had already taken the initiative, and she had no reason to let him finish it hastily. And with Li Ruobing here, even if Tsurui fails in the negotiations or something unexpected happens, Li Ruobing will be able to intimidate Marshume and prevent her from going crazy. Marshume waved her hand. The shop assistants in the lobby bowed tactfully and went upstairs. If this is true, it will become an indelible stain on Marshume. Naturally, the fewer people who know the truth, the better. However, after seeing the shop assistants leaving one after another, Gallop's expression became one of despair. Marshume is clearing the area. Next, her methods are likely to be extremely cruel. Tsurui leaned forward slightly and tilted his head to whisper in Marshume's ear. The sound was not loud, only enough for the two of them to hear clearly. Nearly 2 minutes. Marshume's expression changes constantly, which is very interesting. Gallop broke out in a cold sweat, because he couldn't hear what Tsurui was saying, which made him even more frightened. But Li Ruobing had no interest in listening at all. But the atmosphere in the lobby became increasingly heavy and depressing. The air seemed to be slowly solidifying. It makes people feel suffocated. Chapter 27, A Conspiracy to Kill for Money. Although Marshume is a woman, she is courageous, resourceful, and very generous. Although she also has some shameful stains, this does not affect Surui's opinion of her. In a certain life, Surui had helped Marshume's company several times, allowing her company to reach the top of the provincial capital, and its status had undergone a drastic change. Because in the endless cycle of reincarnation, Surui is like a mastermind, changing the fate of different people. This is also one of his few fun ways to kill time. But not everyone can be noticed by Surui. These people who were favored by him and whose destinies were changed all have different shining points. Some may be treacherous, some may be generous, some may be cruel, and some may be righteous. Marshume has big problems. But it does not refer to her business, but her personal psychology and family experiences. Marshume started out with a small tailor shop. After decades of hard work and some opportunities, she turned that small shop into the luxury brand it is today. She is indeed very successful in business. But what followed was her emotional failure. Her first marriage ended because of her husband's infidelity. After that, she never looked for a second love because she knew very well that with her looks, it would be difficult to find a man who was truly devoted to her. Most of those who wanted to get close to her were after her money. As her career grew, the emotional void became more profound. She started spending money to support some young gigolos, but each time it ended quickly. A relationship between the sexes maintained by money is not reliable. Until she met Giaola. When they first met, Marshume also wanted to support Giaola for a period of time, but after living together, she found that Giaola was completely different from those previous gigolos. He was careful and considerate, and even the emotions he revealed unintentionally seemed very real. Take care of her life in every possible way. She was shaken and believed that she was truly blessed by God and had found true love. So, she bought a house and a car for Giaola, and even transferred several stores under her name to Giaola. She was never stingy with spending, and she never refused anything as long as Giaola asked. She even gave her supplementary gold card to Giaola. Just a month ago, Giaola proposed to her at a carefully prepared banquet, and she agreed. Successful in both business and love. Her life is complete. But, according to Surui's investigation in that life, he knew that the truth was not at all what Marshume saw. Giaola never treated Marshume sincerely. Giaola has a son. During the time he was dating Marshume, he also had a mistress outside. His proposal to Marshume was a trap. A few million could not satisfy Giaola. What he wanted was Marshume's billions of assets. Marshume has no children. After the marriage, Giaola would become Marshume's first-line heir. So, he set up a scheme with his mistress who was a resident singer in the bar. Giaola's mistress is named Hanmai. Because she works in a bar, she often comes into contact with people involved in the dark side of society. Some contraband items can be purchased from these people. For example, marijuana and medical clostridium samples, mixed in women's cigarettes and food, will slowly erode the human body. There will not be any abnormal reactions in the short term and they are difficult to detect. But over time, oil will damage the human body's central nervous system, leading to mental confusion and split consciousness, while medical bacteria will cause liquefaction of human tissue, decreased liver function, and eventually death from liver necrosis. This process takes nearly 3 to 5 years, and once it occurs, there is no possibility of treatment. Even the hospital couldn't find the cause of the disease. Moreover, Surui also knew that Hanmai had once planned to cause a car accident to kill Giaola and Marshume just 1 year after their marriage, so that Giaola could inherit the estate smoothly. But Giaola refused. The reason is simple. This method is likely to arouse the suspicion of the police, and 1 year is not enough for Giaola to successfully control the companies under Marshume. Giaola needed time to clear himself of suspicion, so he chose the safer first method. In a certain life, Surui kidnapped Giaola and Hanmai and interrogated them, and he got all the details of the plan and the people who implemented it. He knew very well what Marshume's current situation was. Giaola's mistress is named Hanmai. She is a resident singer in a bar and now lives in Bishue Garden. There are 3 apartments there, all bought by Giaola. 2 of them are under Hanmai's name and 1 is under Giaola's name. This was the first sentence Surui said in Marshume's ear. He could clearly sense that Marshume's breathing became heavier. Marshume knew that Giaola had bought a house in Bishue Garden, but she didn't know that it was the den where Gaola kept his mistress. Gaola's original name was Gao Jianjun. He was from Gaojigu, Zhenjiang County. It is true that he was married and had a son, but his son lived with his ex-wife and had no contact with him anymore. His appearance next to you was a premeditated plan. You are worth billions, have been divorced for many years, and everyone in Tongju knows that you like young men. Gaola deliberately approached you and behaved differently from other men to attract your favor. Gaola wants to use marriage to divide your property and company, and eventually drain you out. Surui said a lot in a row. I have done a premarital property appraisal. Even if we get married and then divorced, he won't get a penny from me. Marshume spoke softly and expressionlessly, and no emotion could be detected from her. But what if you died? Surui smiled, his words coldly. In a marriage, if one party dies, the spouse will be the first heir. They don't dare to use this method. If something happens to me, he will be the first person to be suspected. Marshume's tone was not excited, she just slowly expressed her views. For example, we naturally dare not use methods such as car accidents, but what if they are some slow-acting methods? Surui asked with a smile. You should have noticed that your smoking addiction has been getting worse recently. You also have a poor appetite and are often tired. In fact, if Surui said this unilaterally, it would not have much effect. The most important thing is that when combined with Marshume's own situation, she would soon realize that something was wrong.